do it.
Good morning and welcome to the Mike Graham Show. I'm Mike Graham and this is the Mike Graham Show, as you can see from the sign. I apologise once again for being slightly late. Tardy, 7:01.
Whose fault?
Pooch has been on holiday, right?
Yeah.
Every day this week, he's not been on it at all, right? We've been late. Yesterday he was filming the window cleaners, right? There was window cleaners here out the window. William Yarwood's here. Very good morning to you, William.
Morning, Mike.
Good to see you. Are you hydrated? Have you had enough
I'm
water?
hydrated. I've got sun cream on.
Good.
You know,
Okay.
just double check, guys. There we
Yeah,
are. I'm hydrated.
Very good. Absolutely, because we've got health and safety measures
Indeed.
now coming in. Because as the station grows, we've had to take on some HR people.
Yeah, I bet
They've
you
said,
have.
you know, whatever you do, make sure that everybody that comes in is properly hydrated, that they've got water, that if they need anything at all.
Although I think I might need a big jug behind me sometime later in the show. However, if I feel like getting more dehydrated, you know, as a pale-skinned man myself. Yeah, we are very sure.
We're getting some of those in later, actually, but that's for another time. We've got loads to talk about this morning. It's a funny old week, isn't it, news-wise? Because the papers have all got sort of different stories going on. Tony Blair has raised his head, hasn't he, into above the parapet. But there's all the papers have got different stories, but it's all about a lost generation this morning. Yeah. They've suddenly all discovered that there aren't any jobs in Britain, and there's a lot of young people who have got no hope or prospects for the future at all. And I thought, you're closer, obviously, to the youth of today than I am, in terms of your age. Is it that bad? Is it terrible? Or is it just a result of kind of, kids not really knowing what they want to do and not really being able to go and just do any job they want, like I used to do?
Look, I think it's a combination of things, Mike. I think there's always going to be an element of people going to university, coming out with useless degrees and really not knowing what to do with themselves. Yeah. But I will say that I do have a lot of sympathy for people my own age, not just because I am obviously, in that age group. Obviously I've done quite well for myself since leaving university. And I know lots of friends of mine who have done very well for themselves since leaving university, but that's often because they've done, they did like maths or they did some science or degree at university. They went to work in finance or they went to do something else and they ended up actually making a relatively good early career for themselves.
Did you go to what you might call a sort of what you might call a good Russell Group University?
Yeah, I did. I went to Exeter University.
Okay.
So
that's quite good. I nearly went there.
Yeah, so I did a humanities degree as well. I did history, but when I applied there, history in terms of its rankings overall in the country, it was the 5th best university for the country in about in the country for history in 2018 when I went. Okay. So I picked it based upon rankings essentially.
Okay. So you would have come out 21, 22.
Yeah, 21, 22.
Right. And so how did you get yourself into the Taxpayers Alliance, where you've now got a great job?
Well, yeah. that took me a little bit of a longer while. I took a month off after leaving university and stayed at home. Right. I think also, because also the Queen had just died at that time. Yes. So I was a bit upset by it at the time. And actually, I was quite upset. And also, her funeral was actually on my birthday. Wow. Would you believe it? Okay. So that was quite a surreal day for me. I was basically looking for jobs in and around politics, and I was having a lot of trouble basically getting into a position, mainly not because I didn't have experience, because I'd done voluntary experience with other groups before. Yeah. I'd done my own things. I'd worked in bars and clubs and things like that. I'd done a lot of, wider experience.
What you would expect people to do.
Yeah, exactly. And problem is that I was experiencing almost a month or two of just no replies. And it's
which apparently is really bad now.
Yeah, it is really bad. It's really, really bad. And the only reason I got a job in Parliament originally doing sort of digital stuff was mainly because a friend of mine knew this MP who was basically interested in this area of things. And it just so happened that Look managed to drop this on my lap when I saw it on a website which said, digital communications officer for so-and-so. Right. And I thought, this is lucky. And then I knew somebody said, could you just put in a good word for me? I still went through the rounds of interviews and still did like a test as well. Yeah. But then I got the job.
And were your parents in London? Or
No. So I moved to London without a job.
Okay.
I moved to London without a job.
Because that's often a real problem for people, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you're in a place where there aren't many jobs. My own kids, for example, who would be otherwise engaged in, say, Sussex, there's not really much down there for them to do. If you're not going to work in a pub, there's not really any other businesses.
No, there isn't. And there are some people who are happy to stay back in their own place and work in a shop or a pub, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. Some people just want a quiet life, and good for them, because they're the backbone of any sort of community, really. But when it comes to jobs more broadly, and I've talked about my own scenario, I was only unemployed for basically like 2 months, effectively, which is not that long. It felt like ages, Mike, by the way, mate, but it's not really a long time at all. Yeah. I know people who have been unemployed for a year to 2 years to possibly even 3 years. Yeah. And it's not because their applications are bad. I mean, I have a friend who works in recruitment who's gone off to Australia, and he went through a lot of our friends' CVs and stuff and really sorted things out for us, like for free. But there was a few of our guys who basically still couldn't get jobs because there's so many people competing for jobs, even lower ranking jobs, and even the so-called like lower ranking jobs still require some level of experience, which I think is crazy. And also, there's just another economic point here, Mike. When you've got a stagnating economy where businesses aren't thriving, they aren't growing, it's more expensive to hire people, why on earth would they take a chance on hiring someone new and young? Why would they bother? And this government is not helping with that in regard.
And they're not helping with that at all. I mean, the Times has got a story saying over half of NEETs, of course, being the acronym for people who are not in education or employment or training. Alan Miliband has done this report. Can I just say, by the way, I mentioned this the other day, I saw Alan Miliband on Laura Kuenssberg's show. What are they doing, the Labour, right? He's wearing a suit, right? A dark suit. And he's got a black polo shirt on. Which is only,
black polo shirt?
Yeah, so it's got like buttons down to here. So there's 3 buttons. It's like a tennis shirt, basically. Black, done up to the top, no tie. I'm like, can you not just put like a white shirt on? You've come into work today, white shirt. You don't have to be terribly poshly dressed. I mean, I wear a tie just because I like wearing a tie. Don't have to, but he's a government employee, effectively. He's supposedly telling people that they should be, helping themselves to getting a job, and he's dressed like somebody about 30 years younger than he is. And it's like, but then the reason I object to it is because that somebody somewhere in the focus group has said, "Oh, wear a dark polo shirt with your it's bollocks." I'm sorry,
Same with the navy suit thing we were discussing a while back,
like with like Starmer with his dark
navy suit and then wear like a red tie or a darker tie.
No, but he wears the dark shirt.
Oh, he does wear the dark shirt as well, doesn't he?
And looks idiotic, right? Yeah. And Andy Burnham is another one, with his round neck kind of turtleneck t-shirt.
And he wears hoodies as well and stuff as well.
It's like you're nearly 60, mate. Which you dress to your age. Yeah. But no, so they say over half of NEETs have never actually held a job. Yeah. The published report by Alan Miliband comes out today, why almost 1 million people aged 16 to 24 are not in education, employment or training. Yep. It's found that 58% of those people have never had a job. 15% of them are graduates, have been unable to secure employment. And I hear stories all the time, listening to other stations or whatever, of people who say they've applied for 200 jobs, 300 jobs, and they haven't even got an answer for most of the letters they've sent in. You've talked about it, haven't you?
I've got a comment here for William, which I think would be really useful.
Yeah.
On screen.
What, do you have any CV tips?
Yeah.
CV tips. So
put a couple of £100 in as you send it off.
Yeah, I do actually. First of all, you should basically never go over a page or two ever. That goes the same for your personal
I would say
statement.
1 page.
One page is perfect.
Yeah.
My first CV did have 2 pages on it. My first CV I ever wrote before it got sorted out, I actually wrote fucking 5 pages, which was way too much. Yeah. And luckily my recruiter friend sorted that out. Right. Basically, because you also need to consider what job you're applying for. Your CV shouldn't be the same job for every job you apply for, because different things will show different skills. And therefore, when you include your jobs on a CV, you should also tweak the sort of skills and things you learnt in that job as well to apply to whatever job you're applying for. Yeah. Also, none of this like personal nonsense, what your hobbies are, what type of personality you have.
I enjoy horse riding.
Ignore, I did the Duke of Edinburgh Award when I was in year 9. Really? Don't include any of that stuff. They don't care. Right. They genuinely don't care. Right. Even if you just did a
Here's one for you, right? Do you start it in reverse? Because I used to find when I was in newspapers and I'd get CVs sent to me all the time, I used to hate the ones that started with a sort of chronological order of your life.
Yes.
Like I was born, I came out of my mother's womb, and then,
I learned to walk at age 4
when I was 4 years old, and, I had my first tooth when I was, and it's like, no, go from the back forward.
Go back, start from your last job.
So start with, the last thing you did, and finish with when you were born.
Exactly. Right? Start with the last job you've had, and also highlight basically how long you've worked there as well, because highlighting how long you've worked at a place also shows a level of dedication and a level of like, oh, actually this guy turned up for a year, 2 years, whatever it might be. Also include whether it was full-time or part-time.
Yeah.
So if you have a job that was part-time or even full-time at your university, that says something to your employer, like, oh, this guy actually did extra stuff no one forced him to do.
Is willing to actually work.
do that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But to bring it back to the conversation more broadly about young people in this country and lack of jobs and economic growth, the ONS basically admitted the other week, actually, Mike, and I did a big thread about this on Twitter, which I've got up here, that basically they've been underestimating how many young Brits are leaving the country.
Yeah.
They've been underestimating them. And actually, if you look at the overall statistics, in 2025, around 246 British nationals left the UK, while only 110,000 returned. That means net migration for British citizens was at minus 136,000. And here's
that's just in that age bracket.
No, and here's the biggest gap. The gap between those leaving and those returning is the largest amongst younger working age groups, with around 75,000 more people leaving than arriving in 2025. And also, young people are staying abroad for even longer. For example, for Australia's holiday visas, this is quite crazy. In 2025, almost 79,000 Brits were granted Australian working visas, up from around 20,000 the year before. Meanwhile, the UK-born population in Australia of 20 to 29-year-olds has surged by 40% just in the last few years.
Wow.
40%.
That's interesting.
So people are basically moving abroad. Young people are moving abroad because they're seeing the kind of economic opportunities out at home. They're seeing a lack of house building.
Yeah.
They're seeing their taxes go up through the wazoo. And they're seeing...
and they can't see their ability to buy a house coming anytime soon, right?
And they also don't see any future here. So many people, and I know people, friends of mine who've moved to Australia, New Zealand, America, Canada, places like Portugal are becoming big destinations, Dubai, of course, even places like Austria are becoming big destinations, where young people are essentially saying, you know what, I can do the same job I'm doing for like 40 to 50 grand more abroad and be taxed less, and also not be seen as some sort of villain because I earn a lot of money and want to get on in life, and therefore they move abroad. And I think
it's a better quality of life.
And it's a better quality of life as well. And also, like, you know, it's sunnier. It's also, there's a... in this country, I think we've had this for a long time, Mike, we have a bit of a crab bucket mentality. So basically, if you get rich or if you're successful, the immediate thought of some Brits and you know, some people even on the right more broadly will think, that guy's cheated. Yeah. That guy's done something dodgy, you know what? Right? While abroad they don't have that.
The thing that I find interesting though is that there's nothing new under the sun really, because you know, I remember, for example, when I was growing up and we got to sort of my early 20s in the 80s. And we'd had a terrible, you know, decade. The 70s was a nightmare. You know, there were strikes all the time. The unions were running the country. You know, we had a Labour government in, massive debts, and the IMF had to come in and rescue the place and all that. And there were no real job opportunities at all. I started to get some shifts at The Sun and a couple of other newspapers in the sort of early part of the 80s. But there were no jobs because they weren't hiring anyone, right? And they were just saying, well, you can, you know, I was sitting next to people who said, oh yeah, we've been doing shifts for 5 years. And I was like, crikey. And in the end, I decided to go to New York, partly driven by the fact that I had a girlfriend there who I wanted to see. But same thing happened. I was like, you know, if you're in Britain and you've got a good lifestyle and you buy a nice car, somebody's going to key it. Because they're going to go, oh, you got a nice car, I'm going to run a key down the side of it.
Yeah.
And, you know, because you're obviously a rich scumbag.
Exactly.
You know. Whereas in America, they go, oh, you got a nice car, you must have a good job.
Yeah, precisely.
You must be a good guy.
Yeah.
You know, and it was very much that kind of feel. And so a lot of us at that time, my sister was the same, went to New York to work, and she went to work in the financial business, I went to work in newspapers, you know, and we got the hell out of Britain. Yeah. And I think we're in the same place now.
I think we are. And I think that also one of the good thing about Americans is they're very, very pro-risk, and they're very, very pro even you failing. So it's like, if you've set up a business and it fails, Americans don't see that as some sort of loss. It's like, well, at least you tried, you know, nice work, you know, you've done more than I possibly could. If you do a business in the UK and you fail, everyone's like, you're an idiot, you don't have to run anything.
And also there's no welfare culture. No. You know, because it's you're a shameful individual in America if you're on welfare. Yeah. You know, you don't want to be on welfare because people will literally shun you. So you always want to work. And the other reason that people get jobs in America is because they need the health insurance. Yes. Because without a job, you can't afford to pay health insurance.
Which is also, like, on the whole better than the National Health Care Service.
So you need to have a job. I mean, I was listening to something coming in on the way in, and they were talking to some woman who was from some, you know, foundation or other about, you know, trying to get children into work. And she was saying, oh, well, of course, one of the problems is that families, particularly, you know, vulnerable families or families which are marginalised, as they like to call it, have got lots of people in the house who don't work. And if you send one of your kids out on an apprenticeship, it affects the benefits that you get.
That is true.
Right?
That's
well, then stop the system.
Yeah, exactly.
That should not, you know, you should not be discouraged from going to work because your family will be worse off if you go to work.
Fraser Nelson actually did quite a good documentary on Channel 4 about this a while ago, and it was following, he was doing a few case studies, and it was following this one guy who really, really didn't want to be on welfare anymore. He really wanted to go do some apprenticeship, he wanted to go to college, he wanted to learn stuff. But basically, when he called the job centre or the DWP or whatever, essentially, I want to do this course, I want to get off benefits, I want to be a productive citizen.
Yeah.
They were like, oh, well, we're going to have to stop your benefits then in full. And then he was just like, well, I can't work while doing an apprenticeship. It's not paid. Right. I have to do this alongside it. And they're like, oh, well, that's not how it works. So basically, instead of becoming a productive member of society like he wanted to be, he was forced to stay on benefits because the DWP was refusing to help him out.
And that's ridiculous. I mean, that's where a lot of people are trapped, I'm afraid. And you know, I don't blame people, actually.
And it's not their fault, Mike, actually. It's the system's fault.
No, if you make more money being on benefits than you do getting a job, then why wouldn't you be on benefits, you know? But it's terrible for the economy. It's terrible for people's self-esteem. It's really bad for society because people just feel that they can do nothing for the rest of their lives.
And it should terrify, actually, especially, I think, people who are a little bit longer in the tooth, and I'll explain why. If you get rid of young, productive Brits who, on the whole, will have, you know, relatively decently paying jobs, especially if they're working in the city, and will be paying high marginal tax rates, and therefore funding the state. If you're a pensioner and you're reliant on the state pension, if you're reliant on the triple lock being kept in place, you should be doing everything you can to make sure that young people are staying in this country because they exist actually in all reality to pay for those benefits over time and also fund the National Healthcare Service, fund public services. And when the tax base gets smaller, Mike, when the tax base gets smaller and gets poorer, more and more taxes will have to be raised on working people and lower income people and middle income people, which then means their standard of living will go down because basically you've lost so many young productive people and indeed, as we're seeing now, losing wealthy people.
You've also lost that sort of travelling carpet ride, if you like, of people who will maybe in their 20s have an income of, say, 30,000 a year, but who by their 30s and 40s will be making maybe 100,000, paying more tax. But that's not happening. Because that particular kind of, you know, elevation isn't going on.
Or you're losing potential science graduates who would come out of university and would work in like things like finance or hedge funds or even in AI and tech sectors who would be earning a decent bit of change and also paying a decent bit of money into the state. But when they're going, you know what, I'm just going to go work for an AI company or a fintech company in Dubai or United States. Well, they're not paying taxes in the UK anymore. So they're paying taxes elsewhere, which means you've actually that's a net loss. I mean, I think the story you were talking about says that this is having like a net hit to the economy about 125 billion quid, 125 billion pounds. That's a lot of money.
It's a huge amount of money. And also another story which is sort of tangential to it, but different, is that birth rates are plunging in this country as well to the lowest level in half a century. And it turns out that foreign-born parents account for now a record 4 in 10 births. So there are more, you know, and I go on about this all the time and people go, oh, you're just some kind of xenophobic maniac. But, you know, Britain is now a country which is occupied to a large extent by people from other countries. You know, and you can say, well, so what? What difference does it make? Well, it does make a difference because we end up losing more and more of our culture every single day that goes on. And, you know, every day you get on the tube and you find nobody speaking English. Every day you get on a bus, nobody speaking English. And now you've got more and more foreign children being born to parents who are from somewhere else.
Supported by, of course, the lifting of the two-child benefit cap as well.
Supported by the two-child benefit cap, supported also by the welfare system. And you've suddenly got a load of foreigners living in Britain who are not really contributing to the system and who are denigrating it effectively. And I know that that's a massive generalisation, and I don't mean that to be in any way offensive, but it makes a difference.
Yeah, of course it makes a difference.
Britain is no longer the same country that it was that I grew up in.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and maybe even wasn't one. I mean, I'm only 26, but I mean, Britain was different 10 years ago.
Yeah, even 5 years ago.
5 years ago than it is
in the last 5
now.
years. The sort of advance of the foreign element of this country has changed it massively.
Well, that's the Boris wave. That's the Boris wave.
It is the Boris wave.
That's the Boris wave, and a lot of them also over time, over the next few years, will get indefinite leave to remain, which is also like what I'm worried worried about burning because I think he will just fast track all that kind of stuff and revoke Mahmood's ILR reforms, no matter what he says to the press. But to talk more broadly about the birth rates issue, this is also linked to the youth issue and the unemployment issue I was just talking about earlier, and also linked to the housing issue. If young people cannot get a stake in life, cannot get a good paying job,
kids, are they?
not going to get a house, and also not actually meet a woman or a guy because of the dating market being the way it is.
Do you find that from your friends of your age that fewer of them are settling down or finding flats to live in, or you know what I mean?
So I'm friends with a few Christian people, and so a few of my friends have got married relatively young. However, the majority of them still don't have kids.
Right.
Only like maybe one of them has kids.
And is that because they're worried they can't afford it, maybe?
Well, no, they are worried that they can't afford it. Some of them are a little bit well off. I mean, I went to Exeter University, so the kinds of people you hang around with, like they're not from my background in North East Wales, right? They're not sort of like working class, lower middle class people, right? But for someone like me, there's no even time frame in my mind, Mike, for this kind of stuff, because it doesn't come into my purview, because house prices are extortionate. We're not building enough houses, and also then there's the dating market the way it is. I've had a little bit more success there recently than previously. A little bit more, but not.
Every time you come in here, you're telling us more stories about your prowess in that area.
I'm just, but mainly that's because I sort of didn't engage in it, mainly because it's become a little bit. It's become quite toxic. The dating app scene, I refuse to use. I refuse to do that. I am not submitting myself to an algorithm. No. I am worth more than an algorithm.
No. The swiping left and right thing.
Exactly. I hate it. I hate it to bits. It's also inauthentic and all over the place. But also when it comes to,
you end up having to kill them, because they won't leave the house.
But when it also comes to the house building as well, like if you can't have a place to live, how on earth are you going to raise a kid?
Yeah, right.
Right, that's
and if
the key
there's no
point.
stability, and you have also, and then feeding back into the job scenario where you've got a job which is not particularly long term, and you know that it's not particularly secure, because that's the other thing that we don't really talk about, and they haven't, and Miliband hasn't talked about it. All this kind of crusade to let's get everybody to work. Yeah, but what kind of job are you going to do?
Exactly.
And if you get a job which is actually tangentially kind of not very important, and you don't have very many responsibilities, and it might be a job that only lasts for a couple of months, and then you get laid off. That's not a job.
No, it's not a job.
It's not job security. It's not. There's no pathway to sort of advance yourself. You don't have a plan in your head. I mean, my two boys, youngest boys, and Pooch is going through this as well with kids who are sort of late teens, early 20s. They're not entirely sure what they want to do, but they're not being given really any encouragement to get into any particular business. And unless you're a self-starter or you're kind of helped by your parents in some way, shape or form to get into a job which you can then build a career on.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem to me to be a pathway for a lot of kids.
No.
To go, well, what do you fancy doing? And they don't really know, and they look and they go, well, I could get a job in this company, shuffling envelopes or making the tea or whatever it is, but there's no kind of route to making a career out of it.
Yeah, there isn't, and also because the way the job market has changed, people tend to have jobs on their careers now.
Yeah.
So obviously, it's back in the day, so to speak. You go into a company and you stay there for 20, 30 years, and you move up through the ranks, and you'd have a company car and a pension and all this kind of stuff, right?
And you could see a progression.
Yeah, precisely.
That you could make.
Well, now, I mean, I'm 26 and I've had. Well, if you count my recent promotion, I've had effectively 3 jobs since I was 22.
Right.
Although only at 2 places. And then obviously I've done bar work in the past as well, but that was just to make a little bit of money extra on the side, which I like doing. But there is, I'm a self-starter, I'm a go-getter. I mean, you know this already. Right. I'm very proactive.
Yeah.
And this is the one element that I will criticise some of my generation for. There is, I think, sometimes when I meet people my age, there's sort of a shrug of the shoulders, the I don't know, man, the
work-life balance brigade.
The work-life balance brigade, which I really, really dislike. I think that basically you should work when you need to work, and when you don't need to work, you don't work. Right. And if that means on a Monday you've got no work to do, fine. Yeah. But if it means on a Saturday you've got stuff to do, you need to bloody well do it. Totally. And I hate this sort of. Because I wake up at 5 o'clock every Thursday morning for you, Mike, because I love you, mate. But
Thank you.
I've never woken up so early for a person in my life. But nevertheless, I know that plenty of people my own age say if there was a different
scenario,
they just wouldn't do it. Right. They'd be like, well, what am I getting out of this? What would be the point? And it's all about self.
Well, let's not forget, one of the reasons that you ended up doing this was because your former boss, who's now councillor, slept in one morning.
Yes, indeed.
And he was meant to be in here, and he was like, "Oh, I'm really sorry. I'm terribly sorry." But you know, I haven't forgotten that. Yeah. And as much as I like Elliot Keck, and big up to you if you're watching this morning. You know, that sticks in your head. Yeah, and you go, "Well, he's not very reliable because you know he was meant to come in one morning to do the papers, and he slept in. Yeah. And he completely forgot."
I mean, I think he did bring you wine to apologise.
He did bring me wine. No, so listen. So it's not. I like Elliot a lot, and I wish him very all the best. But in the end, you know, we run a business. You know, exactly. I can't afford to employ people, and I know that we don't pay for people to come in. But you know, you can't afford to rely on people who are not reliable.
No, but so you know you can rely on me.
I know I can rely on you. You're always here.
Oh, well, always.
And again, the reason I say this is because again, for many kids who are trying to make it in the big wide world of job opportunities, you know, they're not reliable. Yeah. And you have to just be there. I mean, one of the things that I was taught at a very young age was just keep turning up. Just keep being there. And if you're working in a newspaper, if you're working in the media, if you're working at a radio station, sometimes they'll just go, "He's good. He's always here." Yeah. And oh crikey, you know, the drive time host has just crashed his car. You do it. Yeah. You know, it's that kind of serendipity.
It opens
and
if
you're there,
for you.
If you're not there, you're never going to get
precisely. That. And this also plays into the sort of work from home culture as well, right? Like, I mean, I don't like working from home at all. I hate it. I feel very unproductive. I feel bored. I like being in an office. I like talking to people.
It's nice to go somewhere, isn't it?
I mean, especially in this heat. I mean, our office is air conditioned.
Yes.
My bedroom isn't. No. So actually, I'd definitely rather be in my office. But also, like, I'm in Westminster. I can see friends after work. I can go and have something to eat at a local restaurant, wherever it might be.
Which again, and I used to say this during COVID, that you know people underestimate how much damage it did for people to work from home. And all these bozos would say to me, "Oh well, don't worry. Even if they're not spending money on lunch in the community in London, they're spending it in their local area." And I'm like, "No, they're not.
No, they're not.
Because if you're working from home, you're not going out to a Pret in your local town to buy a sandwich. You're going to make a sandwich. Well, you're not going to spend the same kind of money. Precisely. You're not going to stimulate the economy.
Exactly. Yeah. And to sort of tie out all these bits which we've been talking together, I think that me and you both have sympathy for the younger generation in this country. We both understand why they want to leave the country. We also understand that the problems in regards to economic growth and the problems in regards to the ballooning welfare bill and the issues regarding the ballooning tax burden. It's not their fault because they've not been alive enough for it to be their fault. But obviously there are still some elements where young people need to maybe pull their finger out just a tiny bit. Yeah. But one thing I will say is that any government, whether it be on the right or the left, that genuinely wants to get economic growth and productivity going, their relentless focus must be on making sure that businesses can hire young people, that young people are being encouraged to go not just to university, but to do apprenticeships and also just go maybe straight into jobs after they're 16. Stop arguing that basically every young person has the same trajectory of basically going to college or sixth form and then going to university. Some people, I know friends of mine who went to sixth form and it was a bad idea for them, and they ended up instead of going to college and doing a vocational thing, and actually that made their life so much better. Yeah. Now they're fixing cars, right? Me, I'm not like that. I'm a nerd. I'm an academic. Yeah. I need to go to university. But you need to basically stop having one universal way of how young people should go about their careers, because every person is different, and every person has different skills. And an economy, and a functioning economy and a functioning society should allow that, instead of basically shoving them all through one sort of pipeline through sixth form to university to email job effectively.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. I had no idea we were going to talk for half an hour about this one story. It's
been a worthwhile discussion, though. No, Mike.
It has. Because I mean, it affects everyone. It affects people my age, because I've got kids who are looking to get into the workplace, and it's really difficult for them. And so I sympathise. I totally sympathise. I also, as a taxpayer, I'm concerned that we've got this huge body of people, I think 1 million young people now, who don't work and who have no likely sort of prospect of doing so. And it's a damaging, worrying thing for the economy. But I want to move on to, before we let you go, do a couple of other things, because Tony Blair is on the front pages, was on the front pages yesterday. But before we do all of that, Pooch is just about popping in with one of our guests, Henry Bolton. I think he's coming in a bit. We've got a poll this morning. Okay. We did one yesterday on ice lollies. What's your favourite ice lolly? So it went so well that we've decided that this is now the way forward. So today, the poll is, how do you have your toast? The first choice with butter, dry toast, brackets air, right, meaning nothing at all, jam and marmalade, or sardines. I've already had a pedant of the day application, by the way, Pooch, from Olivia, who says, what sort of heathen puts your polls together? To which I said, you do. Why is Marmite not on there?
Because Marmite's horrible.
It is horrible, but some people like it.
I don't like Marmite either.
I hate Marmite.
Marmite haters in the room.
I hate Marmite, right? Yeah. Also, I once had a girlfriend who liked Marmite, and I didn't know how you were supposed to put it on the toast. And I put loads of it on, like sort of, marmalade.
Yeah.
And she was like, that's not how you do it. You just literally dip the knife in with a tiny amount, and you kind of just spread.
Well, then you don't like it then. If you don't like it.
Yeah, so what, you're having just a tiny little bit of Marmite. So, yeah. No, they do say, of course, that you either love it or you hate it. Or have you seen that meme about Starmer, where it goes, Starmer, but Starmer's like Marmite. You either hate him or you really effing hate him. Which is quite funny.
But no, I have mine with butter. Mine with butter. But I like jam on toast as well. I like jam on toast as well.
I would say, I quite like butter. I like jam and marmalade, and I like sardines as well.
No, okay.
Sardine and tomato. Is it?
Yeah, it's good.
Sardine, tomato?
I like air.
Air, yeah. Pooch, because he's such a curmudgeon, right? He just puts nothing on his toast. He's like a Spartan. No, he's like one of those Spartans, Waste his time.
He will have dry toast and water and sleep on a rock on the floor.
Doesn't sleep at all. And the only reason he sleeps is because the dogs finally go to sleep, and he then sleeps with the dogs. Can we play the Tony Blair clip? Because we haven't played any clips yet. I was just saying to William when you were out, I didn't really expect to spend so much time talking about youth unemployment, but there we are.
No, but it's
interesting.
We get carried away, don't we, Mike? We do get, well, that's fine.
We do.
We enjoy
this is why we love having you in, because you're a man after our own hearts, and you're a thinker, you're a philosopher, a modern day kind of
philosopher.
Yeah, you are modern day Pericles. Let's have Tony Blair on Keir Starmer. Even he thinks he's a prick.
Taxes are too high for working people, and some of the things we're spending money on, I think we've got to change. So I particularly identify the very large sum of money we're spending on net zero, which I just don't think is the right priority for the country now.
Yeah, and indeed, you call on the government to halt the net zero acceleration and prioritise cheap energy over clean energy. So just for total clarity, are you advising Keir Starmer to rip up Ed Miliband's green energy targets, for example?
Yes, I am, because, and I'll tell you exactly why. And it's not that I'm against renewable energy, clean energy, and it's not that I'm a climate denier, but it's coming to terms with this reality. The three biggest emitters in the world today are China, America, and India. Together, they account for just over 50% of global emissions, right? All of them are pursuing cheap energy and electrification. Doesn't mean to say they're not doing renewable energy. China builds more renewable energy than the rest of the world put together. It just means that the lens through which they judge policy is cheap energy and the need for electrification, particularly in the age of AI. Britain's emissions are under 1% of global emissions. So we can't solve climate change. And to impose costs on our own business and consumers in order to accelerate to net zero when the rest of the world is not doing so is I don't understand the logic behind it. Or shutting down our own North Sea oil and gas industry in circumstances where, again, I don't know another country in the world that's doing that if they've still got a requirement to import energy from oil and gas.
There's a great one there from Peace saying, don't look into his eyes. Because he's become like a sort of a gargoyle of himself, hasn't he? As he gets older, he's turned into the evil Tony Blair.
He gets more evil.
Look, is that Cliff Richard? He's had Botox, I think, as well.
Yeah, he gets more evil.
Right.
Okay, let's talk about this whole Blair thing, because I find it so interesting. First of all, can every single like high status journalist get off the high horses? And because Blair has said nothing that's particularly revolutionary at all.
No.
Right? He's been saying stuff that
they love him though, don't they?
He's been saying stuff that like various backbench Tory MPs and Reform MPs and think tankers like me and other people in the media have been saying for like a decade, right? We only do, like he said earlier, Britain's only at 1% of global emissions. Why are we rushing to net zero? Oh, it's not almost like we've been talking about that for like 10 years or anything.
It's not like you started
it's not revolutionary,
right?
but people are treating it as revolution because it's Blair.
Right.
And it shows you something, that when Blair comes along and says something, everyone goes, everyone must quiet.
Yeah.
Sir Tony Blair's talking, our Lord and Saviour Prime Minister.
Let's bow down.
Let's bow down.
To the great intellect.
Everyone pretends to hate him, but they still have this
it's
aura.
a bit like a throwback, though. It's a bit like the Oasis, rebranded concert tour. Because people wanted to remember the 90s, because it was a lot nicer and better, and people had more fun. And when they look at Keir Starmer, and you've got to do your impression, obviously, before you go, because they see Starmer and they look at Blair and they go, actually, Blair was pretty good compared to this bozo.
Everyone's got nostalgia for like 2003.
Yeah.
Everyone's got early 2020s nostalgia.
Again, I was listening to a conversation about this yesterday on another station where they were saying the great thing about Tony Blair's first sort of time in government in '97 was nothing bad happened. Everything was quite good. And so, therefore, he looked better than
Princess
he actually
Diana
was.
did die, didn't she?
Princess Diana, well, that was a gift to him, though.
Oh, yeah, because he used that to People's Princess,
the People's Princess,
reform the monarchy.
And that was also during the period where he came out with that fantastic line about the Good Friday Agreement, where he stood there with Alistair Campbell kind of looming over him, and he said, this is not a time for cliches, but I feel the hand of history on my shoulder. And you go, come on. Even we can see through that, for God's sake.
He likes to dramatise everything.
He was ostensibly a far better politician and leader than this idiot that we've got now.
I'm very fascinated by Blair, mainly because all I knew when I was growing up was basically Cameron and Clegg. That's basically all I remember. Although I do remember Brown very, very briefly when I was first sort of becoming aware of politics. His eye gets sort of further down his face every time you look at him. So he's just looking for more gold to sell off.
And that weird thing he used to do with his mouth. Or at the finish of every sentence, you kind of go...
have you got gold?
That's my impression of Brown.
Gold under your mattress? That's mine, thank you.
Let's just sell it. Just sell all of it.
Well, actually, funny enough, Taxpayers Alliance was set up. If Taxpayers Alliance is anything, it's a Gordon Brown hate group. We were set up in 2004 because he decided to start spending loads of money. But no, nevertheless, Blair in his essay, which I've read, and Blair in his interviews, which I watched yesterday, doesn't say anything that particularly revolutionary in my view. But the reason it's being taken as revolutionary is because Blair has now suddenly come out at a relatively convenient time, just when the whole Labour government seems to be on its knees and sort of not being able to sort of deal with itself.
And why do you think he has done that? Because we were talking about this earlier, and I think he's worried, genuinely worried, that the Labour movement is about to collapse and die.
I think he actually. I think Blair, whatever you might think of him, I think Blair's trying to help. Blair's trying to say to Keir Starmer or Andy Burnham or Streeting or whoever it might be, I don't think he cares particularly.
No.
He just cares about the progressive movement surviving. And he basically thinks, because he doesn't like reform, he doesn't like Nigel Farage, he doesn't believe in that kind of stuff. And therefore he thinks that basically in order to save the progressive movement, you need to basically go back on a few of the shibboleths that you've basically imbibed for years. So net zero, mass migration, but also things that Blair miss out. He complains about like civil service being inefficient, when actually one of the reasons the blob exists as it does is because of the way Blair and Brown set it up with the expansion of the Cabinet
they laid
Office,
the foundations
Supreme Court,
for the whirlwind we're now reaping.
Yeah, exactly. So actually a lot of the problems that we have today, I believe, do start with Blair. Although I will say that on regards to the net zero stuff and economic growth stuff, Blair, on the whole, was like not mental when it came to that. Like he never did any like net zero impositions because that wasn't really around at the time. Economic growth was still quite steady under Blair, although of course that was simply inheriting the Thatcher Major legacy, of course. But when it comes to whether Blair is doing this to save the Labour Party, I think he is, because I think Blair is actually quite worried that if Reform or Tories, whoever it might be, end up destroying Labour in a few years' time, or possibly even closer than that, with the potential snap election coming if Burnham wins, he is worried that basically that means the Labour Party will again be out of office for a huge period
and
of time.
And maybe will become extinct. I mean, that's the existential problem for Labour is, Andy Burnham, for some reason, has kind of given them a stay of execution. And I'm not quite sure why.
No.
Because I don't think Andy Burnham is the answer. He's never been the answer. I don't think he's particularly clever. I don't think he's particularly efficient or indeed relevant, actually. But somehow he's taken the focus away from Downing Street and away from Starmer. So nobody's talking about Starmer anymore.
No, exactly. I think Burnham's an authentic charlatan. He's done U-turns.
Very well said.
He's U-turned on a bunch of positions already on migration, on rejoining the EU, on economic policy, and I don't buy any of it. How are people thinking this guy's really authentic? This guy's so different from Starmer. At least when Starmer U-turned, just sort of went, all right, yeah, he's a snake oil salesman. I sort of believe it. But no one sold Keir Starmer as this authentic guy. While Burnham is selling himself as, I've got my polo shirt on and my navy jacket, and look, I grew up around
his playlist. Oh God! I mean, seriously, people were like, "Is this guy Alan Partridge?"
I know. It's pathetic.
He's put out the playlist, which again is not so much a sort of northern powerhouse scenario, but it's a sort of North London dinner party playlist. Where they've got the Christy Moore song, which is all about the internationalists taking on Franco. And it's like some kind of revolutionary load of old bollocks with a guitar. And it's just you just go no, just no, stop it.
But whether Burnham will basically imbibe any of Blair's advice is another thing, and whether any of the Labour members will take it as well. And I think Burnham's responded, Streeting's responded.
Because the Labour Party hates Blair, don't they?
Yeah, they do. A few of them do.
Yeah.
I think, however, just on a sort of final note, is that Blair still has so much power and so much influence over British politics and Labour Party politics, to the extent that basically all we've been talking about really for the last 24 hours, and all Labour politicians have been talking about for the last 24 hours, is what Tony Blair is saying.
But if you look at what this Starmer government is, it's a Blair creation. Alan Miliband's in there as the employment czar. Jackie Smith from the House of Lords, former, Blairite minister, Peter Mandelson. The whole Mandelson thing would never have happened without Tony Blair. Alistair Campbell still obviously, influencing what's going on inside of Downing Street. Pat McFadden, who was the minister under Blair, who is now the sort of enforcer inside the cabinet. Burnham himself was a Blairite. He was Chris Smith's SPAD when he was the first 97 government, and then he became, I think, the Minister or the Secretary of State for Media, Culture and Sport.
Miliband was with Brown in the Treasury for years.
He worked for Miliband. So the whole Blair sort of, they used to call it the Witch Blair Project, didn't they? Is still going. And his influence is still there. But listen, we've got to stop because we could do 3 hours on this.
3 hours on this.
I've got to ask you a question because I've noticed this week, and I said this to Pooch this morning, every day this week I've been driving around and seeing these weird-looking cars, normally white, normally electric, and they've got a sort of a turret at the top, and they're not the Google cars, which you get used to seeing where they're filming everything for the Google Maps scenario. These are, I didn't know what they were. And then on the side, I saw for the first time yesterday, Waymo, right? And that's the name of the company. And they're apparently driverless cars.
Yeah, they are.
Driving around in London. Now, I haven't read anything about this. I didn't know that we had driverless cars. And this morning, in fact, I overtook one because it was going so bloody slowly. And I was trying to get into work. And I was like, forget this. He was doing about 18 miles an hour. I say he. I mean, I don't know how you refer to a driverless car.
They, them. Non-binary car.
What are your pronouns? Take me to the Greek.
Waymo.
Yeah, Waymo. But I'm not happy about this, right? Because I don't like driverless cars.
Right.
You know me, I take views on things.
You do.
I'm absolutely against, because in America, they had a real problem. I was talking to my son, who lives in LA. He said when they first started, people were going into them and having like coke parties.
Oh, really?
Sex parties. They were having porn stars were going and making sex films in the back of them because there was nobody there.
Don't try and sell them to me, mate.
Sorry. Because there was no regulation. People were getting drunk. like I say, doing lines of coke, having sex, and they suddenly had to go, oh, crikey, this whole new kind of revolution. We hadn't thought about that.
Yeah.
So I'm now wondering if that's what's happening in London. I don't want to be behind a car where that sort of activity is going on. I don't ever want to get in one. I would never want to be in a car that didn't have a driver. Would you? I mean, how do you feel about it?
I mean, I'm all in favour of scientific progress. I remember seeing this kind of stuff come out a few years ago when some former Conservative ministers went to the United States and they were sort of seeing new technologies there. And this Waymo, whatever it's called, driverless car thing, was a huge new thing that was coming up, and people were really interested in it. I'll reserve judgment. I'm a little less probably reactionary than you are on some of these issues.
Maybe
a little less.
You think?
One thing I will do, because you know what I'm like when looking into things, I can get into things relatively easily. I can sort of have a look at their prevalence in London and how quickly they've come up.
Well, I've seen them every day this week as I've driven, out of here at sometime after 10. Every single morning, I've seen one.
I'll look into it because I saw one a few weeks ago.
But shouldn't we be told as citizens of
Right,
London?
exactly. That's the thing.
Like, for example, what if you run into one? If I'm driving and I crash into one of these driverless cars and you get out to exchange, information, there's nobody in it.
Yeah.
What are you supposed to do?
Think, oh, I've killed somebody. It's like, no, no one's there.
The driver's vanished.
It's like, hello, leave your number on the door.
Like Johnny Cab in that Arnold Schwarzenegger film, when he goes to Mars, Total Recall. I just think there are issues that we haven't been told. I want to know who's given the license to these Waymo bozos, right? How many of these cars are there? And what happens if you hit one?
Yeah.
Maybe I'll just drive. I mean, in fact, you know what, Pooch? You should lend me your car this afternoon, right? And I'll go crash it into one of these things and see. Yeah, because I don't want to do it in my own car, right? No, because I don't want to do it in my own car, obviously, because I don't have the trouble to fix. But I can do it in your car, because your car's brilliant, right? He's got a car that could drive itself. But you're not allowed to, are you?
No, you can in Holland.
So, in Holland?
Yeah.
It's got a long way to go, isn't it? I fancy you sitting in the back of the car. Well, but you have to sit in the driving seat, don't you?
Yeah.
So you can't completely abandon it and get in the back with your wife, and have a coke party and some sex. You can't do that. So there's not much point, is there?
Yeah, there's not much point.
You're not going to sit in the driver's seat and pretend I'm driving.
Yeah. Like,
I don't
like
get
a child.
It. Yeah. That's right.
Look, Mum, I'm driving the car.
I don't want. I just object to it. I blame Sadiq Khan because he should be blamed. Why are these things driving around without my knowledge?
When I first saw them, I thought they were facial recognition vans. I thought, oh great, Keir Starmer's Britain once again.
Yes.
I'll have a little dig around for you, if you don't mind, and I'll send you something.
Maybe see if you can hire one for a trip and see how easy that is. Do a little video. Yeah, no, it'd be great. Here I am, and you can talk to maybe you can talk to the driver, even though there isn't one. I don't know.
I don't know. The cabbie.
I just don't get it.
Busy day today, mate.
Because the other thing for me is if you can have a driverless car, you don't need seats, do you?
No.
You just get in, there's going to be a piece of bed or something.
Put
you just lie down.
Get in the boot.
Yeah, but you don't need a driver. You don't need a driver's seat, do you? So you could have more room.
A recliner, like a chaise longue in your car,
Exactly. So a little cocktail bar. I don't know. I think... maybe I've gone mad. I don't know. Pooch says I need a holiday.
Yeah, also we've gone black.
I think he's right. Also, the screens have all gone black. It's probably not a great thing. Does that mean... it's all gone dark. They're saying it on YouTube as well.
Pooch, mate.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So we were just complaining about it's probably the big driverless car lobby. Driverless car lobby.
Yeah, we've been hacked.
Taking over.
We've been hacked by Waymo.
We're back again.
No, we are back again. We've been hacked by Waymo.
Waymo, yeah.
I don't like it. I'm sorry. We can maybe run them through the marathon. That would be the one.
Yeah,
there you go.
Driverless cars and marathons.
We're getting close. Anyway, William, great to see you.
Good to see you, Mike.
Fantastic. William Yarwood, of course, campaigns director from the Taxpayers Alliance. And what's your have you got a campaign going at the moment?
We're looking at this overnight visitors levy stuff. So Labour basically want to impose. Allow mayors to impose higher taxes on people doing staycations, and I think that's basically egregious.
This is at the same time as telling them that they can get 5 pence off the entry to Legoland.
That's. I mean, don't even get me started on the Rachel Reeves thing. But nevertheless, we're considering basically going after these areas that are going to impose more taxes on people staying in big cities or wherever it might be, because actually I don't think you should be taxed on your holiday, for crying out loud.
No, not at all. I mean,
life's hard as it is.
Tax foreigners if they're if they're coming in from abroad, by all means, because a lot of places do that. But we shouldn't be taxing our own people.
No, absolutely not.
By the way, speaking of Rachel Reeves, I should just mention this. Pooch has become a bit obsessed with her. This is her as Richard III. Oh. She actually looks more like Richard III.
You've edited it, yeah.
She looks more like Richard III than he does.
She's not that bad there.
But you know, Pooch has suddenly taken a shine to her.
Have you?
Yeah. He started saying some very odd things about what he'd like to do with Rachel Reeves. I don't want to say too much.
Well, he likes Keir Starmer now as well, I remember.
Yeah.
He's bought and paid for.
But this is even more sinister because, he fancies Rachel Reeves now.
Fair enough.
I can sort of see it, but it's not.
Greater tragedies have befallen, man.
Yeah, I think he's having a midlife crisis, to be honest.
I think we need to move on.
All right. Anyway, well, Henry Bolton's here. We're going to talk to him in a minute, but also our next guest is here. But we also do we not need to do some news?
Okay, let's quickly do news.
With Edward Hughes, because we've gone a bit long on that first section because it was so interesting. Anyway, William, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Enjoy the rest of the week. It's Thursday already, actually. We've got Plunk of the Week coming up later, haven't we? Yeah. Let's get Edward Hughes with some news.
I'm Edward Hughes, and do you know what? I'm fed up with the rubbish news, so I thought I'd read something more interesting. Sonnet 29. When in Disgrace with Fortune and Men's Eyes, by William Shakespeare. When in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I all alone bewean my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate, wishing me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy contented least. Yet in these thoughts myself almost despising, haply I think on thee, and then my state, like to the lark at break of day rising from sullen earth, sings hymns at heaven's gate. For thy sweet love remembered such wealth brings, that then I scorn to change my state with kings. Laters, tigers.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm not quite sure what's going on there. We'll have to investigate that. We're running a bit late, so probably now is not the time. But our next guest is here, Dr. Einat Wilf, a former member of the Israeli Parliament, diplomat, and chair of the Oz Party, I think. Dr. Einat, hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Yeah, very well indeed. Nice to talk to you. I guess we should initially speak about what is happening in the Middle East right now in terms of where the peace deal is, whether the Straits of Hormuz are going to be opened, how you guys are doing in Israel, and how you feel that the whole kind of situation has been unfolding.
It's all a bizarre limbo. Every day it's a kind of will he, won't he? Every day there's a new kind of twist, surprise in the plot. So, for example, yesterday, suddenly the idea that if the countries want an agreement with Iran, then all the Arab countries, Pakistan, Qatar, Saudi, they have to join the Abraham Accords, and it's not really clear. So this is like a complete new twist. And yeah, it's all a bizarre limbo here in Israel, where literally every day the war could resume, and then it's ballistic missiles or peace could break out. Very odd.
Yeah, and are you still kind of under threat, as it were? Because the last time I spoke to somebody in Israel a few weeks ago, it was, you were still running up and down stairs into bomb shelters and all the rest of it. Is that still going on, or is that kind of stopped for the moment?
First of all, in the north, absolutely. Israel's north continues to be bombarded and attacked by Hezbollah, and in that sense, Iran is still very much trying to maintain its stronghold in Lebanon and undermine Lebanese sovereignty. Gaza, for now, is less of a threat, but Hamas is definitely rebuilding. And in general, I mean, as I said, Iran could erupt any day, but at this particular moment, I'm okay.
Yeah, well, that's good to know. Because, of course, a lot of people said at the time, October the 7th really happened as a result of the Abraham Accords and the fact that, the UAE and other countries in the Gulf were actually doing pretty good business with Israel. And obviously, Iran didn't like that. Hezbollah didn't like it. Hamas didn't like it. So they attacked just to ruin it all, which worked because they did ruin it all. But do you hope that can be rebuilt?
So clearly, the invasion and the attack on October 7th were just part of, to the credit of the Palestinian Arabs, a continuous effort they've been engaged in for over a century to ensure that the Jewish state does not hold. Every time there's a new excuse, but the ideology, to their credit, is consistent. Now, what the American president is now trying to do is to use the current situation, the fact that Pakistan, Qatar, Saudi want to kind of remove the threat of Iran. And as I'm sure you know, the American president has this very much sense that he's not willing to be a sucker. He doesn't want America to be a sucker. So he's basically saying, if America is kind of going to go out and do this deal, which might not be great, I want to make sure that all of you are aligned with American interests, that you're ending your, I would add, entirely stupid, moronic, useless war against the Jewish state, and finally take a stand. And those are countries, especially Saudi, Qatar, and Pakistan, that have made it their specialty to never take a stand. So he's kind of asking them to grow up, and it's interesting how that will play out.
And has it always been the case as well that they're kind of, you're dealing with these countries, but they're kind of dealing with two different hands, you know, the hand that they show you, and there's the other hand that's going on behind their back, which they're not showing you, and you don't quite know what they're doing with it.
Precisely. And that is what the American president is trying to put an end to. He sees the Emirates as a great model, as a country that actually speaks clearly, basically is putting an end to the nonsense, behaves like an actual sovereign country, and says we're going to have bilateral relations with whoever we want. And he's basically telling the other countries, start behaving like sovereign countries, take a stand, normalize with Israel, be part of kind of this American architecture, and we'll take care of Iran for you, but we're not going to do it for free.
Yeah, interesting. Well, as you say, it's a very strange time. We just have to keep watching to see what happens next, I suppose. But hopefully it's all good and you guys stay safe and you can carry on with your lives in a way, a meaningful way, as opposed to having to worry about what's coming at you out of the sky. But great to talk to you, Dr. Einat Will. Thank you very much indeed, former member of the Israeli Parliament, diplomat and chair of the Oz party. Update on the poll. I think we'll have one, shall we, Pooch? What do you have on your toast? It says here. Butter, dry toast is the second choice. Jam or marmalade or sardines. Pedants have already said, why haven't we got Marmite on there? And Pooch has ruled it out, not allowed.
One person's not watching the show because they don't like the quality of the polls.
No.
Yeah.
Is it the same person that wasn't watching the show last time and didn't like the quality of the poll? It could be. Butter seems to be winning at the moment, 67%. I'm a fan of butter on toast, but I quite like, I mean, sardines, you wouldn't have it for breakfast though, would you? Olivia, who's a bit of a pedant today, has said that, you know, the only thing that eats sardines for breakfast is my dog.
Oh, okay.
Right? So, I don't know.
And also some Edward Hughes.
Yeah, what was that all about? Because I didn't want to do that before the last, I mean, have I had a stroke? I just watched Edward Hughes waffle on about I know not what. You're right, Ian, yeah. I mean, I only had one ear on it, but it sounded to me like he didn't read any news at all.
No, he rang me yesterday.
Right.
Up with the news.
Okay. He's basically had enough. He doesn't like the news. He thinks it's depressing.
Should we have another quick look? Should
we have it? Yeah, play it again, yeah. Yeah, and also, what's he wearing?
Good morning. I'm Edward Hughes, and do you know what? I'm fed up with the rubbish news, so I thought I'd read something more interesting. Sonnet 29. When in Disgrace with Fortune and Men's Eyes, by William Shakespeare. When in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I all alone bewean my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate, wishing me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy contented least. Yet in these thoughts myself almost despising, haply I think on thee, and then my state, like to the lark at break of day rising from sullen earth, sings hymns at heaven's gate. For thy sweet love remembered such wealth brings, that then I scorn to change my state with kings. Laters, tigers.
MLB says the best thing about the poll is the fighting over the poll. And why are they fighting over the poll again? I don't know what's going on. Anyway, so that's a Shakespeare sonnet there that Edward Hughes was reading out. I don't know. Maybe he needs a holiday.
He's had enough of the news, I think.
Yeah, well, that's fine, but that's his job. You know, I'm afraid. You know, I know that we're all very kind of modern here with regard to health and safety and all of that, and well, mental well-being. But if you're the newsreader and you're fed up with the news, maybe it's time to get another job. You know, I would ease him out, frankly. Or just tell him to take a couple of weeks off.
He could be our literature correspondent.
We don't want one.
I do.
Well, you do, yeah, but it's not bloody the South Bank show we're doing. It's the Mike Graham show. Melvin Varg is not here. Anyway, but I'll tell you who is here. Henry Bolton's here. Very good morning to you, sir.
Hi, Mike.
Nice to see you. We've had, Olivia, Edward Hughes needs to be sacked. Right? I don't know. Anyway, the one thing that we can rely on is, of course, that no matter what the stormy weather is out there, more and more migrants have been arriving.
Indeed.
And about 1,200 in the past 3 or 4 days?
Thereabouts.
Something like that. 1,000, I think, over the weekend. Very nice weather. Sorry, calm seas. And I just found myself thinking the other day, they talk as if we can't see what's happening. Shabana Mahmood comes out and goes, we've sent more people back than ever. 60,000 people have been returned to the countries from which they came, which I still think is the same figure they've been using for sort of the last 2 years, right? Yeah. They talk about smashing the gangs. That hasn't happened. They talk about moving people out of hotels, which might be happening, but presumably they're talking about giving more, getting through more asylum cases. Which presumably means they're giving them the leave to remain. Yep. They're not kicking them out. The whole thing is a complete shambles, isn't it?
It is. And they are moving people out of hotels, but they're moving people into the community to HMOs and so on. I genuinely think there's 2 things at play here. One is total and utter incompetence. I think they don't know what to do. They don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
And when they go to ask anybody how to reduce the flow, which some of this government and some of the previous government have done, they go to police officers.
Yeah.
Now, I'm a former police officer myself, so I'm not criticising the police, not in this respect anyway. But what do they know about policing international borders? It's not what they do. They police the streets. They deal with road traffic collisions, burglaries sometimes. But they deal with crime on the streets effectively. They don't deal with the sort of the push, pull, and transit factors of international migration,
right,
and the criminal aspects of that. There are very few agencies and organisations that do that, and the United Kingdom really got rid of one of the agencies that proactively did it, which was the Defence Intelligence Agency some years ago. They looked at Albanian people smuggling and developed quite.
So what? They just got rid of that department?
Pretty much. There's Defence Intelligence now, but it's a shadow. We've messed around. Earlier on in the programme, you were talking about Tony Blair, and really under him, they messed around so much with policing and intelligence agencies that they broke it.
Yeah.
And there's a whole load of work that needs to be done. The intelligence agencies themselves, some of them, the head of GCHQ yesterday gave a threat assessment, which I thought was very good. But they've always held it together. The others have had some difficulties because they've come under more political scrutiny. But effectively, the answer is they've damaged the infrastructure, the architecture, the skills, the knowledge base that we had in intelligence in terms of dealing with this. But if you go to police officers and ask, it's like going to, I don't know, a brain surgeon because they're intelligent and asking them to, and they might have some input, some idea, into how to run the administration of doctor's surgeries more efficiently.
Right.
It's kind of the same arena, but they're not. That's not.
But
what
they're
they
not
do.
qualified. Well, of course, that's what this government has done. They've put a guy called James Murray in charge of the NHS, who's never worked anything other than at council level for a housing department in Tower Hamlets. And it's like you're running the 3rd biggest organisation in the world.
They think all these skills are transferable.
They're not.
And the civil service now, again, since Blair and Brown, have focused on generalists, developing generalist skills.
Yeah.
So you move from one job, one government department to another with no, it's no expertise there. But the other thing is that I think this government particularly has absolutely zero grasp that there's anything wrong with this. I think ideologically, philosophically even, they are wedded to the idea that migration is a phenomenon in the world, and we just live with it, we manage it, we cope with it. Well,
it's only relatively recently, like I was saying the last few weeks, that the government have actually started referring to migration as a bad thing. In a sense that they're now saying, "Oh, it's a success if we're kicking more people out of the country."
I don't think they believe that.
A year ago, they wouldn't have said that.
I don't think they believe that. I think they're saying that because they're more concerned about the rise of reform and restore. And this is, it's again, saying that they're moving people out. We'll move people out of hotels. When the government started talking about moving people out of hotels, I said, okay, we need to watch these people because they're not. At the moment, all that we've got is hotels.
Yeah.
So where are they going?
Yeah.
And they're going into the community, and they're being distributed even more.
And that's actually
widely.
worse, isn't it?
It is worse because you can't keep tabs of them on them. They disappear.
And also, they're effectively being funded to live in these places, right? Because they don't have any income, they don't have any ability to work. Many of them don't have any skills to work, and so if they are working, they're probably working minimal, sort of, low-paid jobs, working for food delivery companies or whatever. But basically, we have imported a whole section of new welfare recipients.
We have, and one of the things, was speaking to the French, their position, and I know they get beaten up quite a bit by the British media and the British public and so on. To an extent, that's fair enough. But actually, from their point of view, what they say, and I've always agreed with this position, is that the only reason that these people are trying to come across from France is because the United Kingdom is a relatively attractive place for them. They only come because they want to.
Because they won't get what we give them. They won't get what we give them in France.
No, they won't. And so, but they won't get it almost anywhere else. And so they certainly won't get that path to effectively lifetime residence here. That they've been getting. So the French are saying, if we stop them here, even if 1 in 50 gets through, then there's still going to be that attraction to that pull from the UK.
Yeah.
And all that's going to happen is we're going to end up with more and more building up in France, and they're going to go up and down the coast.
Right.
And they are.
And we've
now
now got the
launching from Belgium
Belgians
and further down.
Who are saying this is actually now becoming a really dangerous prospect, because they know, for example, that the people coming through Belgium are not just refugees, desperate people coming from, terrible places. They are actually, people with malice aforethought. They are they could be terrorists, they could be, criminals. But what they are not is independently kind of, worthwhile individuals.
Yeah, and I've always said, Mike, right from really when the boats started, or before that, since 2009, I've said, but particularly 2014 when the boats started, I've said this. Every day that goes past makes this problem more difficult to solve and more dangerous, because it becomes more complex. And the whole thing, 85% of it is being driven by UK government policy.
Yes.
Failure to see it as a threat.
Yes.
For me, this has always been a national security threat of the highest order.
Yeah.
For the government, as I say, philosophically and ideologically, I think they just don't get it. And those few members of this and previous governments that have got it have not known what to do about it or who to go to speak to for advice.
Because to those of us who talk about it quite a lot, as you and I do, whenever we speak, it doesn't appear to be a terribly difficult problem to solve. Make it less attractive to come, and they'll stop coming. Look at what happened in America. When people in America worked out that if they stayed illegally in America, Donald Trump's ICE brigade would come and get them, they would be kicked out of the country and never allowed back in.
Indeed.
And rather than risk that, they started to self-deport. They started to go back to Central America,
and
to
I think
South
that's
America.
what would happen here.
And that's what would happen here.
However, a word of caution, it's just reality, is that to enable us to do that legally, not just international law, but UK law, we need to go through the process of repealing laws, amending laws, introducing perhaps new legislation. That, as you know, takes a little bit of time. So any government, any party that comes in and says, we're going to change this on day one, is bullshitting.
Yeah.
It can't be done. It cannot be done unless the government is prepared not to change the law to enable it to do it, but is prepared to break the law and criminalise the people making the decisions.
Right.
So of course, yes, it can be done. I've always said it can be done. And I think these boats can be stopped. 80-90% of them can be stopped within 8 months. But it does take a little bit of time. And I'm just trying to introduce a little bit of realism into the sort of emotional hype that some commentators and politicians put out there. It's got to be done. There is no if, there is no but. But we have to jump through certain hoops just to deal with our own laws first. You can't have the British government just walking over British laws, because where does that lead?
Sure.
You know, it might be another government down the road who decides to do similar, but in a different arena. It might be with surveillance of the population. It might be whatever. So,
exactly right.
So
now you're with Restore now, right? Are you there in a capacity officially as a kind of spokesperson on their immigration policy, or if not, can you tell us what that policy is?
I'm not going. I'm going to be a bit cagey about that, Mike, to be honest.
All right. I don't want to put you on the spot,
No.
It's not what we do.
I know. Well, there's a couple of things. First of all, a lot of the policies, Restore is a new party, so a lot of the policies, sort of kind of headline stuff has been put out there. It's in the public domain, it's on the website. But detail is being done in the background on all of those, or on many of them, and then there's a sort of sequence, if you like. So,
because it's not clear to me, and this is nothing against Restore, and I know a lot of people watching this show are Restore fans and may well vote Restore if they get the opportunity to do so, but it's not clear what the sort of structure of the party is really, and whether they've got somebody looking at immigration policy, or, do you know what I mean? It feels as though it's all a bit kind of a one-man band.
It does, but I'm more than confident that in the coming months you will see that structure emerge. There is most definitely a structure. There are people who are working on particular issues, but unlike others, most others who just throw headlines out there, we'll do this, and this. There is, I think, a refreshing new element to what Restore is doing, which is ensuring that all the administration and all of the logistics are in place to support the policy development, policy projection, and actually, one day, hopefully, the implementation of those. Because if you go out there, I know from working with other militaries, I won't name them, that would be indiscreet, but the UK, we have junior commanders, officers are taught very thoroughly, in how to develop their planning very quickly. That you've got to do it quickly, but you've got to do it clearly, and so all the details there. Other armies don't; they just go straight for, we're going to do this, and they screw up. And that is probably one of the main things that makes the British Army more professional than others. Now, it's the same with political parties. You can have any intent you want, and it can sound as good as you want it to, and have the support of most of the population. But if you haven't done the administration, the logistics, the planning behind it, and understand all of the issues that relate to it, you're not going to be able to actually implement it. It'll sound great, but it won't happen. And how many times have we had governments of different colours who have promised the earth and delivered none of it, and found that when reality hits the road...
Which brings me to the mass deportations conversation, which Rupert Lowe would say is the reason that he split off with Reform in the end, because they didn't support that then, but they now do. Is that something that could be done, or is that something that will have legal problems and difficulties because you simply can't just knock on somebody's door and kick them out of the country? Even if they,
you have to have the legislation to do it. That's the thing.
You've also got to have an agreement supposedly with the government that you're sending them back to.
It depends. Again, we're going into policy that I'm not in a position to speak on.
I get
policy.
that.
I know where the thinking is going. I know what the discussion is, but it would be wrong of me to preempt it. But the thing is that, yes, you're right, the detail needs to be there. You've got to have the people to do it. You've got to have the structure, the organisation, the command and control to do it. You've got to have the legislation to do it. And you've got to have the logistical, administrative support to do it. Now, I mean, if you haven't got a returns agreement for an individual, because whether they come from, whatever the circumstances are, that does not stop you, if you have the legislation in place, securely detaining that person until such time as either you can get rid of them, or they just ask and say, I want to go home. And then you let them go. I mean, you're not going to keep them here if they don't want to be here. So there are But I can promise you that there are policies in the mix, and you will see more and more of that emerge. But at the first thing, and it's not public facing, it isn't in any political party, the administration and the logistics has to be in place. And people are being asked, are working on various parts of that mosaic. But really, you know, as a political party, it's only been in place for what, just over 2 months? March.
Yeah.
So I think it's actually done bloody well. And I'm going to make one political point, and that is that you referred to reform wanting to do something or not wanting to do something. And now this is one of the problems that I think if they're listening, take this as advice, that reform is really works on the basis that it can adapt its policy to whatever is most pragmatic at that particular moment in time. Whereas Restore is saying, oh, this is policy, you vote for it, you support it, or you don't.
Yeah.
We're not going to change. You know, the only change will be if circumstances, in terms of, you know, war breaks out, the economy changes, whatever. But lessons learned, again, in a sort of rather military style, the situation changes, you've got to review. But just because the audience you're speaking to, you know, changes its mind, or because the audience, this audience tells you one thing, wants one thing, and that audience wants something else. You don't change your view on it.
No. I mean, Reform, I guess, would say some of the changes that they've made to their policies, particularly on immigration, is because they've done the research and they've worked out there are things you can do and things you can't do.
Well, I guess. If I can give you an example, on the migration thing. When Reform came out with its 4-point plan, do you remember the 4-point plan?
I don't.
It was a 4-point. It was big, lots of headlines, lots of PR, lots of statements and speeches.
Well, I haven't retained it, so it didn't work.
Well, there's 4 points, and it didn't really work with me because I wrote it off straight away. Because the first point was leave the ECHR, which I agree with.
Yes.
Second point was deploy the Navy into the Channel. Well, fine. I mean,
You've already had the Navy in the Channel. They didn't do anything.
Correct. And so I actually had a discussion with one of the most senior people who rang me up and said, you know, Henry, I heard you talking actually on Talk TV. It was.
Yeah, there we go.
and I'd said, well,
a very popular show.
I was asked. I don't think it was by you, but which party has the best plan to stop the boats in the Channel? And I said none of them.
Right.
None, not one.
Right.
What about Reform? I said, well, they've got their 4-point plan, but it simply is not a real plan. It's not. It's four things.
Once you get past point 2, in other words.
Almost before you get past point 1. And what's happened now is that they've now issued 2 iterations of what they would do since.
Right.
So you get one plan, big headlines, big splash, big everything else, doesn't work.
Yeah.
Okay, now we're going to come up with another one, another headline, doesn't work. Okay, now we've got to adjust that, doesn't work. Is that how you want government to run once it's elected?
Well, that's what we've been used to.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, but that's why we want something new. So I think politicians across the board need to stop putting headlines out there saying they will do this, this, and this without having thought through all of the aspects of how they're going to do it.
Right.
It was Eisenhower who commanded.
But what makes Restore different though? Because they'll do the same thing, won't they? They'll come up with policy which will end up being unworkable.
Well, this is
because it's such an unworkable problem.
Well, no, I'm not working on that, but I don't think it is an unworkable problem. I think almost every problem has a solution, but you've got to think through it. And as I was about to say, Eisenhower said it's not the plan that's important. It's the planning process.
Yeah.
Because if you go through all of the analysis of all of the issues you've got to deal with, how they relate to each other, the cause and effect. If you're going to spend money on this, where's that money going to come from? How are you going to do that? So you've got it's a huge piece of work, particularly
because it's a huge problem.
Correct. But if you don't do that, then you are going to be found wanting when you come to implement it.
Yeah.
And so the idea is to do all of that detail and then issue the headline, in a sense. You know, you can say strategically, look, we intend to try and do X, Y, and Z, but you're going to have to wait for the detail because that's the objective. How we get there has to be worked out.
But I think what you'll find, and what they will find, is that there is a certain kind of exhaustion level that the public have got with people telling them how they're going to stop the boats. We've been hearing it. We've been hearing it since Rishi Sunak was in. Probably even before that. You know, we're going to stop the boats. Are you? Okay, then. You know, that was their 4-point plan, wasn't it? We heard we were going to smash the gangs. We were going to do all sorts. You know, none of it's happened because it's not straightforward. It's not very simple.
That's the point, Mike. None of this is simple. If you want to sort out the NHS, what a bloody nightmare and of a complex problem that is. All the different moving parts, all the estate issues, all the procurement issues. You've got NHS trusts with people who are employed, you know, as a result. All the contractual issues, all of this. You've got to sort all this out. It's all sucking money in that's not actually providing any.
I mean, I could cure the NHS in one stroke, which would be to get rid of about 50% of the people who make up 50% of the NHS who are not clinicians, who don't work in frontline, you know, medical jobs, who are basically pen pushers and you know, HR operators and DEI, you know, consultants.
I had a slightly infamous conversation with somebody quite close to me about the DEI employees in the NHS, and I was told I was small-minded and bigoted when I
well, of course you are. That's why you're on the show.
Well, I mean, indeed.
You wouldn't be on it otherwise.
But because I suggested that DEI doesn't have any influence on patient outcomes. So now people talk about the civil service, want to cut the civil service. I want to cut the civil service. I want to professionalise the civil service. I want the civil service to be once again what it used to be. It used to be the envy of the world, not so very long ago, in our lifetimes, very definitely, in our adult lifetimes. But when you just say you want to sort of cut people and cut this and cut the estate and so on, you've got to figure out what you want it to do before you know how to design the structure, the resources and so on that are going to deliver that. And it's the same with the NHS, it's the same with borders. What is it you want to do? Now let's design the whole complex architecture, the structure, the personnel, the skills, the training, the uniform maybe. Where are they going to work? The geography of it, the legislation of it. Now this is all doable. It's what we used to do as a nation. But again, rather since Blair and Brown did totally screw the civil service, I mean, now there are very few people, if any, in the civil service who will even remember what it was like before. You know, and Tony Blair with his well, not his, but the UN's Millennium Development Goals, which he made the cornerstone of his foreign policy. Which then, you know, if you were in the civil service, all you had to do was start worrying about the environment and poverty, and then you'd get promoted. If you were working on that issue, then that was where you got your points to get yourself promoted. So all of that was totally broken. The skill sets were broken. There weren't linguists in the diplomatic corps. There weren't, you know, so many things went wrong. We can put that back. We can restore it back to where it was with the sort of in the modern, you know, appropriate for the modern world. But that's the problem, that people have been taught by a succession of politicians, in power and otherwise, that solving these things is simple and straightforward. And it's not actually, I think a lot of people, a lot of politicians are saying much the same thing. Labour's not, but everybody else is saying much the same thing as to what they want to do. And I say to people, okay, if look at the headline, what do they want to do? But now start looking, are they actually competent enough to do it? Have they done the delivery, the detail? Have they demonstrated to you that they've done the detail? Now, the problem that people have is that they don't have the attention span or, you know, the bandwidth in an increasingly complex world, you know, worrying about God knows what just to survive in the modern world in Britain, to pay attention to all of that. And they don't necessarily, you know, understand the complexity themselves anyway. But it all goes back to we have been voting for politicians who've told us what we want to hear rather than have the competency to deliver it. They're very good on stage, or they're very good speakers. You had Tony Blair on earlier. He, as you rightly said, I think, you know, he was a leader, whether you agree with him or you don't. He led, but he led us in a very bad direction.
No,
but that's why he was so popular, because he had the gift of the gab. And we need more than the gift of the gab these days.
We do, and I think people have also seen through all that as well. But listen, we've got to stop, because otherwise I'll get in trouble with Pooch, because we're running very late. Henry, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed for popping in. Much to discuss resulting from that conversation, I'm sure. We've got Jamie Jenkins, I think, next, haven't we? who is here. There's our favourite man from Welsh Wales. Jamie, very good morning to you, sir.
Morning, Mike. I see Edward Hughes has got his beret on. I think he's moonlighting in the day. He's chucking the people on the boats in France. I think.
He's got a bit internationalist. I think next he's going to be wearing a stripy shirt. And he's going to have a load of onions on the front of his bike or something. I mean, he's got that sort of look about him, hasn't he? I think he definitely needs some time off to calm his jets. But let's talk about the state of play this week. I mean, everyone's talking about youth unemployment. Everyone's talking about getting the youngsters back to work. I guess, as ever, what you need is to tell us how the government is likely to look at the statistics and go, we can fix this, and how they're going to fix it.
Yeah, well, they're already talking about how they're fixing this one, Mike. So this is we've got nearly a million young people who are, and this isn't we've always had young people in the country who are unemployed or they're not in education and things, and I think what the government really needs to wake up on this one is that they've done their flagship now where they're saying they're going to be paying to take on more younger people, paying for basically more apprenticeships and stuff. That's what the government's come out and said. I think Pat McFadden's been talking about that. And this review by Alan Miliband, it's just telling us what we already know because the data is been there for years, Mike. And what we're seeing increasingly now over the last 12 months, and in particular since the Labour's job tax come in, is that first run of the job ladder where an employer will think, right, well, I'm going to take on somebody. It's a bit of a risk taking on somebody who's new because the government needs to remember that companies have to take a risk on people. They're taking on somebody who's got no skills, no experience. So there needs to be an incentive. So the jobs tax has increased, obviously, the cost of employing these young people. We've seen the minimum wage. So what happens with the minimum wage, Mike, is there used to be a much bigger difference between the rate that younger people, say 16 to 19, would be paid versus, say, the adults 22 and over. It used to be a much bigger gap, but that's narrowed because Rachel Reeves is like, yeah, we're pushing up the national minimum wage, and that pushes that cost obviously to the employer. So the solution for the government now apparently is to pay employers to take people on through apprenticeships. Now, It's not rocket science, Mike, and you're talking about the boats with Henry there. We'll probably touch on the birth crisis that came out in the data yesterday in a second as well. All of these problems have been there for a while, but there's no solutions from the government because all you need to do, Mike, is if you make it cheaper, so maybe you have tax breaks, you don't need to take tax off an employer and then pay money back to an employer, because what do you need for that, Mike? You need civil servants to actually administer it all there. What you need to do is just basically say, if you're employing a young person, maybe you don't pay any, the income tax is lower for your first job. Maybe you also say there's no national insurance, there's a low cost, and they'll take these people on because it's not rocket science when you think that countries like Germany, countries like Japan, they have much, much lower rates of youth unemployment than what we do because they've got a competent government who looks at what jobs do we need, what's the education system doing, let's bring the two together. So by the time people finish education either at school or at university, there's a job at the end for them. Does this government know what they're doing, Mike? It doesn't have a bloody clue.
No. Well, no, because what they've done effectively in the last 2 years is to remove any reason why people should give young people a job. If you're running a company and you know that it's going to be now a cost to you, basically, which might be unrecoverable to train some youngster up, you're just not going to bother doing it because why would you? At the end of the day, there's no incentive to employ people anymore. In fact, it's punishing. And also, I was telling somebody earlier, I think William Yarwood when he was here, that I was listening to a conversation earlier on this morning about how some families will say to their kids, well, the problem is if you take an apprenticeship, it will affect the household income and therefore we won't get as many benefits coming our way, so don't bother. And, we saw that story, I think, earlier in the week or back end of last week, where apparently one of the government's initiatives is to go round to houses where people are on benefits and say to them, stop discouraging your kids from going to work. But the point is that, and they're going to pay them money, by the way, to stop discouraging their kids to go to work. But of course, if you can't really blame the people, if they're making more money on benefits than they would be if they were going to work, why would they go to work?
Yeah, totally, Mark. And you've got this epidemic now of young people who are coming out of school and they're going on to kind of the PIP payments, those personal independence payments, where young people anxiety are going through the roof, and we don't teach resilience. And what's obviously, and you've been chatting about it this week on the show this morning, Mike, goes the rock of Tony Blair's crawl out from. He's crawled out from under his rock, and you've got to put some of this at the blame of Tony Blair. There's a lot of policies in 2026 that are being impacted by decisions that were made by Tony Blair and his government, many years ago now, Mike, because literally one of the ways of getting the youth figures, youth unemployment figures, massaged or down back in the day was to encourage everybody to go to university. And so the number of Mickey Mouse degrees that we've got in this country now, and the university sector is really struggling. That's why there's, again, talking about immigration, there's an over-reliance on getting international students to try and fund the sheer number of places that we got, because we've got this factory, like a farm factory of getting students to go to university, rack up a load of debt, taking out student loans. Many never get paid back anyway, so technically that's writing debt off from the government. And what they're doing degrees that they come out 22, 23 years old, and basically the employer looks at their CV and think, what have you been doing for the last 3 years? That's no good to us. And Tony Blair drove that mantra of more and more people going to university. And we touched on it last week on the show, Mike, that, with AI replacing a lot of the entry-level jobs, you really need to think about it. For your children, the best bit of advice you can give your children at the moment is to think really hard about going to university, because that debt and the figures that are coming out this morning, and I think the other figure Alan Miliband was pointing out, I think on Laura Koonsberg this week, Mike, isn't it, that they spend about £25 on benefits for these young people versus the £1 that they're spending on trying to get them into work. Flip that the other way around, problem solved.
Exactly right. And just finally, on the boats we mentioned with Henry Bolton there, you've done some stats on the boats coming over, 1,128 people in 5 days.
Yeah, and that's relatively low for 5 days, Mike, because you just wait till the summer. You'll get some days where over 1,000 people come in one day. And
in one day,
and I was reading the story this morning, Mike, that there's some environmentalists just put in some legal action to stop a detention centre in France. We're giving all of this money over to France, and what are we getting in return? Well, we're just getting more migrants. And the country of birth many of these migrants come from are Afghan, Iraq, Pakistan. And we had some data out yesterday from the ONS, Mike, showing the total fertility rate, so that's basically the average number of children that women have, has fallen again to 1.39. But when you compare that by country of birth, British women are really low, so they can't afford basically to have children. They can't get that early job now because they're coming out from university with rubbish degrees. They can't get on the housing ladder. We're having fewer children. And then the population's changing, not just through illegal migration and legal migration, Mike. If you look at the country of birth of the mothers, you've got high fertility rates from people from Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan. So they come over, they have more children than the British population, indigenous British population. And it's having a big social demographic change on Britain, Mike. And this is another one of those conversations that the government needs to really be having with this country, because we need children, we need to have babies to fund the future, but we can't keep relying on migrants coming in having more children when people who are already living here can't afford to get on because of the cost of living, of having children themselves.
Yeah, no, exactly right. And I see that Andy Burnham's made yet another U-turn in his campaign to become Prime Minister, where he's apparently said he no longer believes that migrants should be given immediate access to the benefit system because he doesn't think that we can afford it, and it's too much of a draw for them to come to this country. So he's getting more right-wing by the day, is old Andy Burnham, isn't he?
Well, the thing with Andy Burnham, Mike, he'll say anything he can to get into power.
Right.
He'd be campaigning to...
He's such a charlatan. He just basically says whatever comes into his head that will fix the problem for the moment.
But that's ultimately what the Labour Party do, Mike. They say a lot of things. We've got Plaid Cymru in Wales, Mike. They said a lot of things in their manifesto to get elected. Are they doing what they do? Oh, no, we can't. We've looked at the books.
Yeah.
Most politicians, Mike, they'll say they offer you the earth, but when they get in, they'll give you nothing but pretty much back in return. And this by-election, the main talking point for me on the by-election, Mike, before I go, is obviously the whole restore versus reform argument. I think Rupert Lowe was saying that when they got all those extra councillors in the Great Yarmouth area, turnout went, increasingly up. So if you're a reform and you're saying, well, restore shouldn't be coming in, they split the vote, you might find that Restore stand, and it just encourages more people to vote, because by-elections are normally quite low anyway. So if people who are not going to vote for Reform come out and vote for Restore anyway, there's no impact on the overall result unless Restore get enough votes to actually win. But so it's going to be an interesting one to watch, Mike. I think for your show, we could do with Andy Burnham winning, because then we can just see, well, it was absolute pile of shit under Keir Starmer. Let's actually look at the next couple of years under Andy Burnham. So it's going to give you,
if you thought that was
plenty
bad,
of content for you to talk about for the next few years, Mike.
I know, absolutely right. Listen, Jamie, great to see you. We're up against the clock, I'm afraid, again in this hour, so we're going to try and move on because we've got to talk about climate change in a moment. Because, of course, if you are the unfortunate recipient of a new electricity tariff, you will find that the energy price cap hike has gone up again, 13%, right? Average bills are going to be raised by £221, which is quite a lot of money. It's like, if you think about it, it's 15 to 20 quid a month extra that you're going to be now paying, thanks to our ridiculous, nonsensical, slavish following of the whole net zero nonsense, because you can see that in other countries of the world, electricity prices and prices just in general of what you need to live your life have gone ridiculously high. Annual energy bills, I got this from Rudy, who sent it in earlier. Annual energy bills around the world: France, 485 quid, Belgium, 520 quid, Austria, 470 quid, Spain, 495, Germany, 550, Israel, 590, and you've got Norway, 460, Poland, 150, United Kingdom, 2,325, which has got to be bonkers, isn't it? Why are we paying so much? Absolutely ridiculous. Before we talk to our next guest, Pooch, I've got an idea. Can we listen to the daily update from Andy Burnham? Because he's doing a daily diary on video, and it's so ridiculously funny that I think we should carry it every day. Can we play it?
My second campaign update, and guess what? Today's the day when we can say we've knocked on every door in the whole constituency. So we had lots of conversations, and I'm setting a new mission for myself today, which is now to go back personally to the people who are undecided and have a conversation with them on their doorstep. And I've started that here in Loxton Crescent in Worsley Mains. Two big issues come up in these conversations, and I thought I'd directly address them with you because they're difficult in some ways, but I know what I'm about and what I've got to say. So the first is the clean air zone. It's the case that the 10 councils of Greater Manchester were forced to consider a clean air zone by the Boris Johnson government. After the pandemic, it became clear to us that what had been worked up was completely undoable because the cost of vehicles had shot up. So actually, I did what I always do. I listened to people here, and I went back to Boris and said, the scheme isn't workable. You're going to have to give us more time. And I negotiated an extension to 2026. And the thing is about that, it allowed us to use the B network to do the heavy lifting, because the electric buses, the newer buses that we brought in, cleaned up the air more than anything else, because the old polluting buses were the biggest cause of nitrogen dioxide.
Yeah, there's another lot of old cobblers, right? The clean air zone. Have you been to Manchester? Hey? Yeah, I've got a clean air zone here. Is that right? Yeah, we don't allow you to come into the town unless you pay a tariff. So it doesn't actually make the air any cleaner. It just means that you pay people to people pay you so they can pollute the air, which is what happens in London. Right, so Dick Khan pretended and was forced to apologise because he was making up a load of statistics which turned out not to be true. That around the North Circular Road, basically the roads were cleaner on one side of the road than the other, which kind of tells you they don't quite understand science really, and they don't know what air does, because air is everywhere, isn't it? It's all around us, like love. Remember that song? Love is all around. Well, air is all around, right? So the air isn't any less clean across the street because you're driving a bus that's got diesel-powered engines than it is on this side of the street if you've got another bus which is electric. And why? Because there isn't a barrier in between, and the air goes from one side of the street to the other. Not difficult, this is it. Anyway, listen, we're going to talk now to Paul Burgess, a very intelligent man who knows an awful lot about why the global warming nonsense is still being practiced. Although I noticed lately, by the way, Mr. Burgess, that apparently it's now been admitted by various members of the government that you can, don't worry about the packaging of supermarket foods, because, it's all got so expensive that we don't need to save the planet anymore. We could just give you the food. And for some reason, right, this is really worrying me, Jim Dale has somehow managed to sneak himself onto my show, which I was very much against doing. But I was persuaded, Jim, that you deserved a second chance. Despite all the horrible things you've said about me in the past, that we could bury the hatchet and see if you've got anything more intelligent to say than last time I spoke to you.
Yeah, I think last time you spoke to me, I was in the middle of a field somewhere in a massive drought and massive temperatures, and that was it. Yeah. If you remember. So yeah, I'm springing back again to just put some truth into this debate that we're going to have on climate change, net zero, and everything else.
Well, listen, shall we kick off with Paul? Because you guys can debate away, and I will attempt to invigilate as best I can. Paul, tell us why it is now that suddenly the government are kind of going, well, some of these net zero measures that we put into place a few years ago, we can sort of ease up on them now because it's all getting a bit expensive. And even Tony Blair, Saint Tony of Blair, has said that the net zero crusade is overblown.
Right. Well, net zero is engineering, by the way. It's not climate science. It's engineering. And when you look at it from an engineering point of view, a practical point of view, it's just nonsense. And what's happened recently is the IPCC, the sort of global UN body for climate, if you like, they've actually now said the higher forecast, the whole higher forecast, which the Met Office and everyone else and people like Jim have based things on, is implausible. So that's changed quite a lot itself. But when you come down to the practicalities of it all, when you look at what's going on with our costs, they're just enormous, and they're going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. Now, what the government just did was quite sly. They took a subsidy on the renewable obligation certificates, we call them, from the direct subsidy over to taxation, right? And that month, when they did that, caused a drop in inflation. Right? And they had the cheek to claim a drop of inflation, right? Which they just caused by moving it over. Yeah. I mean, that's the sort of sleight of hand that's having to go on. But that's going to stop, because the next big rise, £200 a year more on the average bill, will squeeze out. And that would have been even worse. That would have been £350, nearly £400, had they not moved over taxation. So you're still paying it. It's all sleight of hand.
Yeah, it really is. And let's talk about Tony Blair, Jim Dale, because he mocked Ed Miliband yesterday over his net zero policies, basically calling it a quixotic fantasy. Said that China, basically the world's largest greenhouse gas emitter, doesn't care about Ed Miliband and his beliefs. And again, whenever I talk to people about net zero and you say, what's it for? What will happen when we get there? Nobody really knows the answer to that.
Well, I think they do. Well, I don't know whether you guys have just woken up from an 100-year sleep, but yesterday we reached the highest temperature ever recorded in May.
Yeah, it was great, wasn't it? I had a lovely day.
It wasn't great. Well, if you think that 9 kids dying in jumping into cold water is great, if you think that somebody dying on the beach
for jumping into cold water, aren't they? I mean, people do things that are stupid,
but
and they get killed.
Stupid when you reach temperatures that are silly and that they are extreme, as was that. Look, the graphs are very obvious in terms of where we're going with this, and the reason for net zero is obvious in the same way. If we carry on with this situation, we are going to be in terrible trouble going forward. And by the way, not just us in isolation. Net zero isn't just about us. There are countries that have already reached net zero. I think there's about 5 of them.
Which countries have reached net zero?
Well, I think Belize is one of them. There are others. You can look it up. You can look it up.
No, you tell me. You're the expert, Jim. You tell me.
Oh, okay. So he wants to argue about.
You said there are 5 countries, right? So what 5 countries have reached net zero? Tell me.
I can't remember them all.
You can't remember them. There's only 5.
I'm pretty sure Belize is one of them.
There's only 5.
Yeah, I think there's 5 of them.
You can't remember any of them.
Already reached. Suriname may well be another. Just top of my head. But look, yeah, just bear with me. I think we're all on cue at the moment with AI, are we not? And the what that is bringing to a changed world and how we approach that changed world.
AI is surely bad for net zero, though, isn't it? Because you need so much electricity to power it, and all the water that you need to cool the computers, right?
While it's in its infancy, let me quote something to you, because it's a very simple one to ask the question: is climate change real? Is man-made climate change real? So I'll quote: yes, human-made anthropogenic climate change is definitively real.
Who's saying that? Are you quoting? You're not quoting AI at me, are you?
I'm quoting AI.
Oh, come off it.
The global scientific community has reached a consensus backed by the assessments from the NASA.
No, I'm not having it. I'm not having it. No, I'm not having AI because AI isn't real. Paul,
okay.
Paul, would you mind answering this? Give us.
Yes, I will. I will answer it very clearly. Let me explain something. You'll always find the peak temperatures at Heathrow. Heathrow is just off the runway there. It's on the northern runway, and it's just off there. Now, what we have in Heathrow is an urban heat island effect because of all the tarmac and all the buildings, etc., which elevate the temperature. I mean, even the Met Office agree that in central London, you can get temperatures up to 7-8 degrees higher than the countryside. Yeah, that's one factor. Now, I've been in charge of a whole country's meteorological stations. I know what I'm talking about on this. And please let me finish. I'll let you finish. So please let me finish. Let me explain what you've got to do with the temperature gauge. First of all, you've got to look at its location, and therefore you've got to look at the urban heat island effect. Yeah, so you've got all that tarmac, all those buildings, and that heats it up even overnight. The effect is even bigger overnight, but it starts the day much warmer, so you get these peaks. But why is it that every time we have a record, it's always at an airfield? Because of the urban heat island effect. Let me finish, please. I didn't interrupt you. Please don't interrupt me. Right? I'll just take you back, by the way. Let's look at his record here, or the record that he's claiming. 1947, we had, allowing for the urban heat island, in a place called Waddington in 1947, we had a record temperature, which actually could have been higher than this week's, right, in the May period. But let me take you to another period. In 1976, I was water resource engineer for the whole of Wales. Now, my work involved in hydroclimatology, etc., has been dedicated to extreme weather. It's been dedicated to floods and droughts. By the way, the worst droughts were all historical. The worst one on records in the 1700s, and all of them rank back from that to today. So today is as nothing compared to the past. But in 1976, we had record temperatures for a long, long time. And actually, if you take the June temperatures now, the June records, let me just give you the details. On 28th of June, we had a 35.6 in Southampton. That wasn't in an urban, it was in a park. It wasn't in an urban heat island. So we now have two records that stand. It's equaled in 1957. So in June record for 1957 and 1976, we have record temperatures not beaten since. So since 1957, besides 1976, we haven't had a single extreme temperature as high as we had then, right? So if you're going to take the logic from Jim, yeah, we're going backwards, aren't we, Jim?
No, we're not. We're not actually. Let's just make something clear, okay? The record that was attained yesterday was in leafy green Kew Gardens, not Heathrow Airport, okay? And beyond that, let me finish. You've had a long chat now, okay? So my turn now. The other stations, and there are many of them that hit similar records. Some airports, some not airports, some in the middle of countryside like my own behind me, etc., etc. So let's make that absolutely clear. The 35.1 is an all-time record. By the way, we're in spring. We're not even in summer. You're comparing apples and pears as you do. You're very selective in your choice of stations and the reasons for them. The last 20 years, every single year globally has been warmer than the previous 20. So the warmest that we've got on Earth that has been measured have all been in the last 20 years. The graph is upwards. It's like the cliff of the eye. If you can't see this, your head is in the sand. Okay, you've got your reasons for denying climate change. You're in the tiny minority. Okay, even those that have decided to go underground and not debate climate change, such as Nigel Farage, Richard Tice, who have had previous debates with, who are now hiding away. Why are they hiding away? Because they know the evidence of their eyes is actually in front of them. And they're almost, I mean, I'd say now, Nigel Farage, I don't believe for 1 second he actually doesn't believe in climate change, man-made climate change. He's hiding away because he knows it is a difficult subject, to a difficult point that he's going to get across, that he has to get across if he's going to continue to deny to the general public, who now accept it around about the 82% level, which was the last poll. Okay, so you're in the 18% poll, and you are the instrumental. You're the type of guy who's instrumental who represents almost the tobacco industry of the past, saying you can't get cancer. You're the guy they wheels on to say, oh, you can't get cancer. It's the same here. They wheel you on to give the untruths that we can all see plainly with our eyes in front of us. No glaciers, the glaciers melting away, etc., etc. All of this evidence.
Can I respond to that, please? I've just given you a fact. I deal in facts.
1 second,
I deal
Paul.
in science.
Just 1 second.
No,
right? Paul, 1 second. This is what Tony Blair says, right? The lens through which you judge policy should be cheap energy and electrification, because that's the way the rest of the world is doing it. So, Jim, you're actually wrong to say that Nigel Farage and Richard Tice are hiding away from talking about it because they don't agree with the rest of the planet. The rest of the planet doesn't agree with what we're doing and what Ed Miliband is suggesting, right? Tony Blair, hang on, Tony Blair says it's a sort of quixotic fantasy to think that because Britain's decided with, by the way, under 1% of global emissions, it is going to go down a different path at huge expense. It's quixotic to think that the rest of the world is going to follow that. It is not, and it isn't. Now, that does not tell me that there is a global consensus on net zero, because there clearly isn't. And if you look at the prices, as I said earlier, if you look at the price of our energy compared to other countries around the world, we are way over and above charging people more money for ridiculous net zero policy, which nobody else is doing, right? £2,500 is what we're told the United Kingdom's average energy bills are, compared to £150 in Poland, £460 in Norway, £590 in Israel, £550 in Germany, £495 in Spain. We can't afford it. And we are the only country in the world, Jim, that's following what you think is right, but which nobody else agrees with.
Can I just counter? Could I just counter what Jim?
He's just asked me a question. That's not the cause. Go back 16 years,
so
and that's when
Tony Blair's wrong.
With tourism, what Tony Blair's making a point that we may be trying to run too fast as far as net zero is concerned, and because of, and let's make this absolutely clear, the reason that the price of electricity and gas and energy per se is going to go up in September time is primarily and absolutely down to the Iran war caused by.
No.
Friend of Farage, Mr. Trump. So we all know that. Everybody knows. Don't say no, Paul, because you know it's not. It's.
I've done papers on this. I've done research papers on this. It's not
true. It's the future. Okay, with 10,000 jobs created in
Let me
Scotland.
ask you another question, right? Paul has said he's written research papers on this. Paul is a qualified researcher and expert on climate change, right? What, Jim Dale, are your qualifications? You were a weatherman, right? You don't have any qualifications to talk about climate change. You're a complete charlatan, Jim. You don't have any qualifications.
Right, you can't say stuff like that, because I can just say that you're unqualified to spout the rubbish you spout. Okay,
I'm qualified to do the show that I do because I'm very good at it.
So
you
my
talk absolute
the Royal Navy qualifications, 40 years in this business.
Royal Navy qualification in what? What did you have Royal Navy qualification in?
Observing. That's what I did. That's a qualification.
No, it was a 2-week course.
What did you do? What was your title in the Royal Navy?
Oh, be very
careful
careful what you're saying, because if you're trying to do that, you're going to end up in court, mate. Okay?
What was your title in the Royal Navy?
Don't try and down who I am. I know how this.
Let me explain something.
You're not the individual, okay? Paul, you're just a water engineer. You're absolutely nothing to do.
I'm not a water engineer. I don't even understand what I am. I was a chartered environmental engineer. I was a chartered water resource engineer who did hydroclimatology work, looking into the extremes of droughts, floods, etc. That was my speciality. I built models recently, scientific models, which explain every year's temperature for the last 42 years, the most accurate it's ever been done. Right, and so on. So I'm into that. But I agree with you, Jim, on something. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter that you've only had a 2-week course in meteorology and the thing. I've got more qualifications in meteorology than you have, but it doesn't matter.
No, you haven't.
What matters is the evidence you bring to the table. Jim, you are telling me, I have just quoted you the June records, which were 1957 and 1976. They haven't been exceeded since. So are you telling me, no, please, are you telling me that your climate work is such that we get cooler in Junes over the last 70, 50 years, but in Mays we get warmer? Make up your mind. I've quoted you Met Office records.
Look, what you do, I say you're good at. I don't think you're particularly good at it, but you mix the numbers up to confuse people. People can see.
No, these are Met Office records.
They're not stupid at what's going on. That's why 80% accept that man-made climate change.
Stop doing the consensus.
And they see it as a potential death knell going forward as far as human life is concerned into the future. And we may not be talking you and I, or even Mike for that matter, but we are talking about children and grandchildren going forward and having to survive in 40, 45 degrees of heat. And it's not just these islands that we're talking about. So there's merit in following net zero, okay? And your tobacco-like denials, because that's what they are, because the playbook is exactly the same from the 70s and 80s as now prescribed. And Mike, if you believe that Nigel Farage or Richard Tice are not evading the climate change debate, get them on your program. I'll come on with them, all right, and discuss it. The Pied Piper of climate change denial, Richard Tice.
Yeah, but you're
in
also
science,
there's
no such thing as denial.
You're the Pied Piper, it would seem, Jim, of complete and utter nutcasery. Because you believe something which is clearly not true. I mean, NASA, you're wearing a NASA shirt, right? Do you think NASA damages the climate by sending rockets up to the moon or not?
Of course, there's a payoff to that, but that's.
What do you mean there's a payoff? No, it's no. Listen, I drive a car, right? I could drive my car for about 100 years and it wouldn't create the same amount of carbon emissions as NASA going up to the moon once, right? So why are you supporting them? Why do you think they're a good thing?
Because you're comparing one rocket to how many millions?
I've just told you. No, I've just told you. I could drive my car for a year or 100 years and it wouldn't create the same carbon emissions.
Are you denying NASA in terms of suggesting that they do not support climate change in terms of saying
they can support it, but it shows the hypocrisy of your position and their position, because they say they support climate change and then they put a bloody great rocket up into the sky which creates more carbon emissions than me driving around for 100 years. And I just think that's hypocritical, don't you?
Yeah, but we can stay in the Stone Age if you like. I mean, I accept that.
So you think it's good? So that's okay then.
At this moment in time, there'll be rocket fuel in the future that will not have the same effect.
Well, there isn't at the moment, is there? There isn't at the moment. There isn't at the moment, though.
No, there isn't.
So why do you support? You should be campaigning for NASA to shut down their operations, surely.
Well, I haven't had a view of that. That's not what I'm focused on, because that's a different sector of NASA. Maybe there's a little battle going on about that. I've got no idea.
Well, no, NASA is all about exploration into space.
NASA, NOAA, Met Office, Hadley's, wherever you want to look, all the scientific bodies are in one in terms of what is causing climate change. And there is no denial of climate change.
Yeah, well, NASA are causing quite a lot of it, aren't they?
They've all changed it.
Maybe so, but it pales into significance.
Well, that's like me punching you in the face repeatedly and saying there's too much violence going on in the world, right?
Well, no, because that's me and you. That would make no difference to the entire world.
No, but it's a hypocritical situation. That's what I'm talking about. Anyway, listen, it's been delightful to see both of you. Paul Burgess, Jim Dale, thank you very much indeed. The weather is beautiful. Go and enjoy it. Take some time out, sit outside, put some sun cream on, and drink lots of water. Because what you don't want is to become dehydrated. Isn't that right, Pooch? Yeah. We've got to be careful about that. Crikey. And now I remember why I don't like putting Jim Dale on the show. But I mean, he's quite entertaining. People are saying he's like a sort of stand-up comedian, isn't he? Very good. And his qualifications are, to say the least, very, shall we say, in question. Couple of quick super chats coming in. This one from Hey Judy. Oh no, not Jim Dale. Absolute nonsense, he sprouts. There's quite some very funny ones coming in, actually. Mr. Woodward says Sri Lanka reached net zero in 2018 and its citizens revolted overthrowing the government because no one could afford to live and the farmers couldn't grow their crops. Well, this is the thing. I mean, somebody sent me a list of countries which apparently are supposedly net zero. And they're all countries that, you know, you would say, generally speaking, are probably on the side of poverty, you might say, right? And we've got some great, I've had a couple of really good tweets, actually. This one from Voice for England. There was once a consensus on a geocentric solar system. Consensus isn't proof. Does Jim not know about the medieval warm period? What a silly sausage. And here's one from Junkyard Dogs who says, Mike, why is Jim Dale wearing a NASA pullover while preaching about climate change? NASA burns more fuel than anybody. Well, exactly right. And one from Darren. This is good. Jim Dale's a waste of time. She should be in a mental hospital. Parker says, poll on climate change believers, please. Actually, yeah, should we do that tomorrow?
Yeah.
Climate change poll.
Comment of the day.
Comment of the day is from Seaside Babe. Jim Dale should be in a carry-on film. Carry on climate change.
Love it.
Brilliant. Do you know what? Actually, should we have an update on that on our poll today, which is all about toast. Jim Dale's toast. We wish Keir Starmer was toast. We asked what you put on your toast in the morning. We've already been given plenty of pedantry about why Marmite isn't on there. But basically, it looks like butter is going to be the winner, I think, today, isn't it? Yeah. So how do you have your toast? Butter, 66%. Dry toast. That's very unpopular, Pooch.
Yeah,
which is
the rules. The lowest number is the winner.
Is that right? Yeah, so I think what you should do is try and make a poll every day where yours is the lowest voted choice. Dry toast is what Pooch has, 1%. Jam or marmalade, 28%. Sardines, 4%. I think because people are thinking we don't put sardines on toast in the morning. Yeah. But, I mean, I would. I don't care. You know, I'd eat sardines anytime. Yeah. Anyway, listen, we've got to apologise to Lauren the Insider because she's been waiting very patiently to talk to us, and it's a bloody nightmare. Sorry about that, Lauren. We've been running terribly late, very bad form indeed. But and I didn't even want to get to
that man was insufferable.
Oh man, he's such a wally, isn't he? And I actually was fighting against it with Pooch and Rachel. Who's Rachel? Charlotte. I said I don't want to go because I banned him from my last show because he was such a bore. But he's kind of comedy value now, isn't he?
I mean, the thing is with climate change, I'm over it. I don't even know if I was ever into it.
Yeah, no, I never was. I don't believe it. Also, you know, listen, the things he spouted on at the end there about NASA. Oh, well, the thing is, yeah, well, in the future they'll have, rocket fuel that won't be damaging to the climate. Well, yeah, but at the moment they don't have it. So at the moment, whenever they send Artemis 2 up into the sky, you know, basically it's the same as me driving around in a Maserati for about 2 years, with the engine on full blast.
I mean, it makes sense why Elon Musk is looking at Mars, right? I'd be on the first flight over there. Get me off planet Earth. It has gone to shit.
It really has, hasn't it? Because we're now surrounded by nutters, right? Everywhere you look, there's somebody ruining England, ruining Britain, ruining Europe, ruining the world. I mean, I'm seriously, I'm with you. If we can all go and start a new colony somewhere, just take some sensible people and just start again, reboot.
I mean, Mike, everything has been ruined. You can't call Christmas Christmas. They want us to have paper straws. The whole kind of if I hear diversity one more time, I'm sick of it being rammed down my throat. No one asked me. This world is so unrecognisable from the world I grew up in. And I'm looking at, I've got a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. And I think, crikey, if it's like this now, what's it going to be like when they're 10?
I know. Pooch is asking me if it's all right if he says he likes your dress. I think that's all right. It's a very nice dress.
It's Tesco.
Is it?
Really?
Yeah, I love supermarket. My husband doesn't let me do that.
Yeah, I came in on Monday because it was bank holiday Monday. I thought I wore a Hawaiian shirt, which everybody quite liked, and that was Tesco's. You're not keen on Hawaiian shirts?
Well, if you're in Spain having a pina colada, maybe. But I think, you know what? Life has got so expensive. And if I put a few pounds on, then I can just go and buy another dress from Tesco. Yeah. If I shrink it, I'm not spending money on clothes that are replaceable. Not a chance. No. Not living under Starmer. None of us have got any bloody money.
No, exactly right. And if you have got any money, he'll find a way of taking it off you. Because they're now looking at sort of, what haven't we taxed? What can we do to tax? Oh, Andy Burnham's coming in, wants to put tax up, because he's decided that, he's the saviour of the world. And it's all going a bit mad up there as well, isn't it, in Makerfield?
I mean, everything is taxed. So you're now taxed if you go away to another city overnight. Yeah. It's like, you can understand why some people think, do you know what? I won't even work because I come out with, £3 more. My uncle, he's housebound, can't leave the house, can't walk. He's not entitled to any home help. He's paid into the system his entire life. And he said, I can't believe I'm not entitled to help. I said, get in a boat. Just get in a boat, say you're a child and you've lost all your papers, because that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
You know, forget anyone that has actually paid into this system and kept it up and done the right thing, gone to work. You know, maybe it's time we all say, do you know what? We won't go to work. We'll live off the state then. See how you like that, Starmer.
Yeah, I know. And we've got more and more people doing it, and fewer people like you and I actually paying for it. So our price and our taxes go up to pay for more people. I've now got this mantra that I go, whenever I'm out, I was out yesterday for lunch, and I was saying to my friend that I was having lunch with, I said, I feel now as though whenever I go anywhere with my family, that I'm not only paying for our lunch, but I'm paying for their lunch over there. There's a table of 4 people who have come out on universal credit, and they've all decided that they can go out for a meal, but actually I'm paying for that. And you kind of go, I'm sick to death of it. If I wanted to pay for 2 families, I'd have 2 families, you know. Maybe I'd get another wife and get some more benefits, because now apparently you can get more benefits if you have more wives, you know. So let's just not worry about, the bigamy rules. The Department for Work and Pensions will actually pay you to have second wife.
I know and you also get more money the more children you have. It's like, I've got 2, I don't want any more, thank you. But you know, there are stories of Pakistani men walking 16 children to school, Mike. We're paying for those children.
Yeah, and I don't want to pay for those children. I've got my own children to pay for. I'm quite happy. I've never asked for any money from the state. I've looked after them. I've brought them up, hopefully reasonably well. They've worked when they could. Some of them are now looking for work. But the fact is, I've never taken a penny off the state. And in fact, I've provided plenty. And I was talking to a guy yesterday who's put 7 of his own kids through private school. And he said, I actually worked out that not only did I pay for my own children to go to private school, but the amount of tax that I paid probably meant that I put about 700 kids through school.
Yeah. And I mean, look, people can't afford to live, and our taxes are going towards just the most ridiculous things, you know, social housing now. What's the stat about houses that are going to migrants? I don't want migrants having houses. What about those single mums that have been in women's shelters, or, you know, that family that have worked from when they're 16 to try and get on, you know, the housing ladder and can't, and people that are working multiple jobs? This is... It makes me feel sick. It keeps me up at night. I am so angry at what is happening in this country. And then we're called fascists, or we're called far right. If being far right is standing against another ideology, if being far right is standing against unvetted male migrants, call me what you want, because that is what I stand for. I don't want this country being taken over, and it is being taken over.
By the way, I've realised I've forgotten to say Happy Eid Mubarak to you, because obviously that's what face. Look at Sadiq Khan, right? He's in Saudi. He's gone to the Hajj. He says, Alhamdulillah. He says on his Twitter, praise be to God. Truly honoured to be blessed to be able to perform Hajj this year. Double J. I bet he'd stay there. Maybe he could ruin Jeddah for them, and put a ULEZ zone in, see how they like it.
Well, he's there with 1.5 million Muslims. It's a once in a lifetime pilgrimage, apparently, but he's done it twice. So it's a shame he has to come back. But you know, Eid, they've just had it. They've just had it. Unless I'm going
in March, wasn't it? Wasn't it in March?
Oh, but this is another part to it. So all your councils, they'll be spending money doing more Eids. I don't know why everyone has to pray outside. Right. And it's not racist to say that, because actually 30,000 people from the Islamic world praying, how does that impact the Jewish community who are scared to leave their homes? It's an act of dominance.
Yeah, I mean, it's an act of dominance. It's an act of oppression. For an awful lot of the people that are involved in it, you know, for women. I mean, I can see a picture of Sadiq Khan standing in the middle of. He looks like Gandhi. I mean, I don't know if he's trying to do that, but there's a few women behind him wearing head coverings, but there's not any women in the other picture where he's standing. I mean, I just don't know where it all went wrong. When did it all go so bloody well wrong?
Well, it's interesting about the head coverings, because I'm actually working on a documentary about the burqa, and the full burqa and niqab. We're told
James Burqa to narrate it. Sorry, I know that's just a stupid joke.
You're told you can't. I say ban the burqa. Oh, you can't say that.
Oh no!
I'll
look at
say
Sarah
it.
Post and the trouble she got in when she said that.
This is the burqa. burqa is not in the Quran. The burqa is a political symbol that started in Afghanistan and is heavily present within Pashtun communities. Now, within Pashtun communities, there's something called bachabazi, which is also very present, which is boy dance. It's where in rural parts of Afghanistan, they make boys dress up as girls and then abuse them. The burqa is such a huge problem for our society. And we're seeing so many of them at these open Eids. And I'm not okay with this. That is, you know, I've worked with security experts that have said the things they have found concealed in people that are wearing burqas, often not women.
Yeah, well, do you remember there was a case, wasn't there, a couple of years ago, I think it may be more than two or 3 years ago, of a guy who was wanted for a crime, who smuggled himself out of the country dressed in a burqa because, you know, nobody could ask him to show his face because that would be, you know, in some way haram. You couldn't do it. And so he managed to get to the airport, get onto a plane without ever showing who he was and disappeared off and has now never been seen again. You know, the whole thing is insane. Right? And my daughter and other friends of mine that live in Dubai, when they come to London, they go, I see more burqas in London now than I do in Dubai. Because in Dubai, you don't see them.
Well, there are many, many countries that have banned the burqa, but we seem to be, you know, oh yeah, we'll have the burqa, you can have 30,000 people doing Eid. Where does it stop? Because the microcosm is Luton. Luton, we've seen what's happened. And so many restaurants refuse to sell pork, for example. There's Islamic schools. The burqa is heavily present. So where does this stop then? What, you know, where are we protecting our culture? We're not protecting our culture. Did you see the Christmas tree in Trafalgar Square that Sadiq Khan?
Yeah, and it was like threadbare, wasn't it? It was awful.
I mean, it was anorexic.
Yeah.
And oh no, Norway sent it.
It looked like somebody had set fire to it. Well, it looked like somebody had burnt it before they put it up. You know?
I mean, it summed up the nation and how we feel that Christmas, didn't it?
Yeah. And also we now have Ramadan lights. Did you know that? Down in the Strand, which is normally sponsored by, I think it's sponsored by, what do you call it, HBOS or somebody, whatever they are now, you know, the Halifax organisation, Bank of Scotland. And they do the Christmas lights, but they also now do Ramadan lights. And Sadiq Khan was out lighting them. I think it's sometime in the autumn that they do it. And you kind of go, well, that would be fine. If you went to Istanbul and they had that, you'd go, this is quite interesting. It's quite a nice cultural kind of change. It's a bit different, you know. I've come to Istanbul for a bit of a, you know, cultural lesson. I'm going to go and have a kebab and all that. But this is London. Sorry, you know, I don't think they should be doing it.
Well, they shouldn't be doing it. And we're told, well, the Muslim population is 15%. I mean, I think when the next census comes out, people are going to get an almighty shock. But we should have Christian festivals that are the dominant, you know, festivals we're marking. You see, you go down Sainsbury's and all the aisles, it's like Ramadan. It's like, hang on, what's going on? And then you go, the Qataris own Sainsbury's. And then you see how all of the cities are celebrating, you know, the Islamic festivals. And that's because the mayors have literally taken over. It's little, or not little rather, but Islamic cities.
Well, I mean, I was the reason I brought up the Eid Mubarak thing was that every single bloody politician over the weekend, it was Starmer did it, Burnham did it, Steve Reed, or as I now call him, Steve Eid, put out a happy, you know, Mubarak message. The guy who's the MP for Portsmouth put one out, and I looked up Portsmouth, or Plymouth, maybe it was Plymouth. 5% of the population is Muslim. Was it Portsmouth? 5% of the population is Muslim, right? And I also found out that 10% of the Portsmouth population is left-handed. I said, are you going to do a sort of happy left-handers day for them? Because there's twice as many left-handers as there are Muslims.
But, you know, people are so scared to say things now. I've got, you know, an inbox full on my social media and people say, thank you so much for speaking out. He couldn't speak out. What do you mean you couldn't speak out? He said, we'd lose our jobs. What do you mean you lose your job? We're in a constitutionally Christian country. Banning the burqa is a safety fear. Eid should not be as heavily present. It should not be marketed as such. It should not be infiltrating. This is political Islam. But people can't say it, Mike, because, we see the mainstream media. No, they're not advocating for anyone. They're not advocating for a constitutionally Christian country. They're making it worse.
No. Oh, no, they sort of sneer. If you watch any, I don't really watch it anymore because I can't be bothered with the BBC and the GMB and all that sort of cobblers, but Sky, But you can tell that they kind of sneer at anybody who goes on and is a Christian. You're like, oh, you're a Christian, are you? That's a bit weird. And that's their attitude, And it's kind of like, hang on a minute, it's one thing if you want to be an agnostic, that's fine. You don't have to have a religion. But you shouldn't be sneering at people because they are traditional Christian people in a traditionally Christian country. What's going on?
In this country, every single child should be taught Christianity because this is a constitutionally Christian country.
Yeah.
If I moved to Dubai, I would do that over my dead body. But if I did move to Dubai, I would absolutely expect that my children would be taught Islam because that is it's an Arabic Islamic country. I would understand that. But now we are seeing children at school in the UK that their parents won't let them go into a church. Right. Their parents won't let them learn anything about Christianity. So how is that assimilating?
It's not, is it? As simple as that. It's just not. Ridiculous. And also, one of the things, Hugh Andre's here. Hello, Hugh. We'll come to you in a second, sorry. How about this, right? Birth rates plunging to the lowest in 50 years as 40% of babies now have a foreign-born parent. That's where we are. And it's not a race thing, that. It's just there's an awful lot of foreigners, particularly in London. I used to go on about it all the time. I get on buses every day and quite often I don't hear an English voice.
Well, this is the thing. And then we're talking, diversity is our strength. But where is the protection for us? We are not being taught about these cultures either. So we are not understanding these people that are coming in. And there are many people coming from parts like Pashtun communities within Afghanistan and Pakistan. These are very, very backwards parts of the world. And so Ben Habib has spoken in depth to me about it. If I were to go to some of these communities, he's told me I would be raped and my life would be put at risk. So then if we are granting asylum to some people from Afghanistan and Pakistan that are from these Pashtun communities, well, this starts to explain why girls are being taken off the streets and women are, being abused. But the mainstream media, there's a blackout on this. Yes. They are not explaining it to people because under national security, Starmer, has absolutely weaponized his position of power. And so people look at the right and they think, oh, you fascist, oh, you're so racist. No, we just know what's going on and that the news is being censored. Mike, you must have seen a huge difference since coming out of mainstream. Yeah. Even though where you were wasn't as kind of mainstream as some, but you must have seen a real difference in terms of the freedom you have.
Yeah, and I was just saying this to somebody yesterday I was having lunch with, and I was like, it kind of took me a while to notice the difference, but I'm seeing it more and more every day because there are things that I talk about now that I wouldn't have been comfortable talking about when I was at talk because there would have been somebody knocking on the door going, it's a bit careful with that, and it's not like it's not an oppression, but it's a kind of discouragement more than anything, and they don't like to feel uncomfortable. And I also know that in that building where I was working, there would be people complaining every single day about something that I said, And they'd be complaining to the management and they'd be saying, this is not really what we should be, the corporation shouldn't be doing this. And you become part of this machine, which I'm now no longer a part of. And so it's great, actually.
I think it takes a while as well. It's like you come up for air. When I left mainstream, I knew it was bad. But actually, and this is why I always use Tommy Robinson as the litmus test, because when you see what they've done to him and, as a byproduct to good, hardworking patriots, you see how dangerous the media is and that it's a for-profit corporation that ultimately grooms people like you and myself. And then when you step out and you actually speak about how dangerous it is, they brand you, oh, you're over, you're bitter. No, I cancelled myself, thank you.
Yeah. Exactly right. Fascinating. Great to see you, Lauren. And people have said, by the way, I know you can give it a plug. You've got a great YouTube channel of your own. Tell people where they can find that.
You can find me on YouTube, Lauren the Insider. Come over, hang out, we'll have a chit chat. And it's about as opinionated as I always am on my YouTube. So, you know, you're not going to get vanilla.
No, good. Excellent stuff. Good to see you, and have a lovely weekend. It's Thursday already, and see you soon. Lauren the Insider, talking a lot of sense there. Here's one from Super Chat from Buddhist. We have Buddhists on the show. When I lived in Spain, you couldn't receive benefits until you could show you had been in employment for 2 years. Well, that seems sensible, doesn't it? That's what we should be doing. You shouldn't be able to get... I mean, I think it's the same in America. You're not allowed to get unemployment if you haven't shown any ability to have worked at any point or contributed to the system. And you're only allowed to get it for about 6 months. And if you don't get a job within that period, they just stop the money. So people tend to get jobs. That's how it works. Whereas now, in this country, we're being told people are being discouraged by their own parents from getting jobs because it will affect the benefits that they get in the household. It's insane. Anyway, we must move on because we're running late. We've been running late all day, and I've had to apologise to everybody. I'm going to apologise to Hugh Andre now, who's looking very cool and calm and collected. Good morning to you. Nice to see you. I was in shorts and a Hawaiian shirt on Monday, but since then, I was so happy when I was out for lunch yesterday. I came out of Boysdale, and the cool breeze hit me, and I was like, wow. This is fantastic, you know, because my flat has been so hot for the last few days. And finally, last night, I actually managed to get some decent sleep for the first time this week.
I'm one of those people who doesn't whinge about the good weather.
You don't whinge about anything, though, because you're a military man.
I enjoy the good weather. I don't whinge when the winter comes, I just ache and creak. That's probably age catching up. Misspent youth.
I don't really whinge about it, but I do say that I can't sleep in a very hot place, which is partly my own fault. But anyway, what are you doing here? What can I do for you today?
Well, it's nice to be invited on. I really wanted to start by thanking all the viewers, and especially all those who attended the live show.
Yes, because I don't think we've seen each other since then.
No, we haven't.
Which was a great success. Thanks partially to you.
Well, thank you and the team, and Pooch and Charlotte, for inviting us. And a number of the We Serve team came down.
They did.
Francis, Ed, Dan, Angus, etc. And if you remember, I discussed, and it's sort of a link here to the way this country's being run financially. As you know, Mike, I've had a few challenges of my own, albeit from my childhood, and I was supposed to, be seeing someone to talk to work things through, and there's no one available for 9 months.
For 9 months, great.
So I thought, right, well, that's unacceptable. What can we do about it? And this really resonates back to, I'm a firm believer that the private sector and the public sector has to work together. But the public sector, and I was out with a load of military guys last night who were just, all of them to a T, saying, if the guys in uniform were just allowed to get on with it, things would get done.
Yeah.
Whereas we got people in suits within the civil service and they're in no rush.
Yeah.
They got a long-term pension.
Yeah.
Whether this, aircraft carrier comes out next year or in the next century.
Is that the sense that the civil service just sort of push things around and they go, well, do that next week and then that can do that?
Well, yeah. And look, I'm going to tell it as it is here. I've been into the main building on many occasions, and at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the doors open and there's a stampede of people in suits. You go up onto the floor plate and there are just hundreds of men and women in uniform doing the same job who'll be there,
still there
till whatever time.
Yeah.
And the problem is that in the military, you're forever on a sort of a two-year posting. So someone comes in, Colonel Mike Graham arrives, wanting to make a difference, wanting to do a job, wanting to do it well. And he's got Hugh Andre sat next to him, who's been there 8 years.
Right.
Oh yeah,
You don't want to do that.
Here comes another one.
You don't want to do that.
That's a great idea, Mike. Let's talk about it next year, shall we?
Well, this is what a lot of the politicians
we need more accountability.
Yes.
We need more accountability, and I don't have the answers at all. But certainly in business, we have to see things through from start to finish. And at the Empire, we put a call out, and all of your guests, between them, donated just under £3,000.
Amazing.
Well, that is amazing, because that now means that we're going to have up to 10 veterans who they themselves have suffered trauma.
Yeah.
You know, like I have, but we've learned how to manage it and deal with it, so that they can then start the pathway of becoming a trauma therapist.
Right. And kind of important as well, isn't it, for people who have been there, as it were, in the armed services, because obviously the trauma that you may have suffered while you were in service is different to maybe what ordinary or sort of civvy street might suffer. And I know I'm not diminishing either one. I'm just saying that if you've been in a sort of war zone situation, or you've been in a combat situation, shall we say, and you've seen things that other people have never seen, and I know what that's like, that's a particular, I would think, difficult thing to overcome if you kind of wake up at night and see it. You know what I mean? Am I being over dramatic?
I loved going on live operations.
Yeah.
But there's quite a lot more, and I want to get down a rabbit hole into sort of therapy and the source and why. Why are our soldiers so bloody good on live operations? Because many of them come from areas of low employment, low income. Many of my soldiers came from care homes, the care home system, and many, and I'll say it, had been and experienced childhood trauma.
Yeah.
And when a child experiences trauma, their heart and soul is ripped out. And suddenly, and I'll put myself in there, you have the fight or flight, or fight or leg it, depending on. You have things like sort of anxious avoidance and what have you. But most of all, many actually don't have a great deal of self-esteem. They don't fear for themselves.
Right.
They don't put a huge amount of value. We are people who want to help others.
Yes.
You've only got to even.
But isn't that what makes
you
them
run towards danger?
But isn't that what makes
sane people run away from danger?
But isn't that what makes them good soldiers, though?
Yes, it does. Yeah, and so a lot will suffer from what's called complex PTSD, which you carry from childhood. But what it does, it creates behaviours.
Yeah.
It creates a resilience. They've survived as kids on their own. You've only got to ask McNabb, Phil Campion, many come through the system where they're tough. They've had to bring themselves up. You used to remember the phrase latchkey kids.
Yes.
Many didn't know who their mother or fathers were and what have you. But they made great soldiers. And I just want to talk about our soldiers now, because I know the army gets a bit of a pounding these days, and not necessarily for the right reasons. I had the absolute privilege last Friday of being invited with Francis, our community manager, and also one of our board advisors, Blythe Masters, who's a very, very keen horsewoman.
Okay.
And we were invited to the Household Cavalry's Mounted Regiment, Hyde Park. Wow.
Yeah.
Now
I see those guys sometimes riding around. If you're early in the morning.
For those who don't know, inside those buildings, which don't look great, but they're built functionally. They do a job inside.
Yeah.
It was an absolute privilege and an honour. Inside, there's a multi-storey car park with 170 horses in.
Go on,
It's multi-storey car park, basically with 170 horses. Every single man and woman knew their job.
Yeah.
They took such pride in what they did. And again, no one walked past without saying, "Morning, sir," "Morning, ma'am," "Morning, sir." Old-fashioned values.
Yeah.
But they took such a pride, and the commanding officer and the adjutant hosted us. And I've known Blythe for many, many years. She's a very, very, very successful businesswoman within financial services, ran JP Morgan, etc. And even she came away with it. Whoa. These guys could teach businesses how to operate.
Yeah.
Slick, well-trained, knew what their roles were, took pride in what they did. And it was an absolute privilege. And we're into ceremonial season now.
Right.
And all that hard work, graft.
And drill,
young men,
effectively drill.
Young men, I'm talking 17, 18, 19-year-olds, but they're in the right environment. Where you have to continuously develop, continuously improve. No one goes on witch hunts if you make a mistake.
Right.
Own it.
Right.
learn from your mistake and let's improve the next time round.
Yeah.
But what we as a nation will see, and what POTUS will never have, is our ability to deliver ceremonial displays, as we'll see shortly with the Trooping the Colour on the 13th of June.
Yeah.
But what goes on behind those scenes? And I was so proud last Friday. We went up to Mess, had breakfast there. It was an absolute privilege, and just reminded me again why we have the best armed forces. We don't have the best kit, we don't have the best equipment, but by God, we got the best soldiers, sailors, airmen, and women. And if you're out there, you're a young man, a young woman, and you can't get a job you don't want to do, go and explore.
Well, isn't it interesting you say that, actually, because we see this morning on all the front pages, Labour risking a lost generation of jobless youth. There's a deficit, it seems to me, in the young people of today who don't know whether they should get a job. They don't really know what job to get. There's not many jobs around. I've never actually thought of it until you just said that.
Massive shortage.
Massive opportunity.
It's a massive opportunity, and look, I don't care whether you're in a private school, state school, whatever. I had the privilege and honour of leading the greatest soldiers in the world on live operations, and they frankly shaped me.
Yeah.
My private school didn't. Sandhurst taught me.
Yeah. Right.
But those men, I had the privilege of leading them, they're the ones who shape me. And I just say to anyone out there, and education starts at home, right? And the problem we've got is, a lot of homes are broken and missing key people. But if you're a young man or you're a young woman, just go and have a chat. Go and talk to someone who's been in the armed forces or is serving. And even if you just do 3 years, if you think you're hard, go meet some hard ones.
Yeah, really.
But you'll learn. You'll learn. You'll get vocational skills. Will do all your adventure training, your travel, and you'll make mates for life.
Well, this is it, and I, people probably will probably groan when they hear me saying it again. But I only spent 5-6 weeks in Bosnia with the Yorkshire Regiment. And the people were, the guys were so amazing, just incredibly. And because we were in Vitesse, where the British camp was where Colonel Bob was, basically. And I was staying in a house which was just,
outside the wire.
It's just outside the
Probably
wire.
one I was in.
But yeah.
One of those,
But we'd go in and have breakfast in the mess. And we went down with drinking the sergeant's mess because they said, don't go to the officers' mess. They're all, stuffy-nosed tossers. And they were just brilliant. And it was such a great experience. And it made me realise how, I don't know whether they were all like that when they started.
No.
But they became something.
No, and this is what I did a podcast yesterday for someone. What the military's great at is when you join, they take the civilian
ship out,
and they put a military one in. Now, the problem we have is not taking the military ones out when you come to leave, and this is what We Served is all about, as you know. And we've had great early traction, and we've already got over 20,000 members.
Right.
We've launched our employment. We've got 1,100 jobs on our job board.
Yeah.
We've got the health and welfare,
Easy for you to say.
well-being even. Sorry, you can tell I'm dyslexic.
We've still got the cap there, by the way.
So families, veterans can go on and see a doctor immediately.
Right.
And Ed McFarlane's bringing on more and more services from suppliers of healthcare and wellbeing products.
Yeah.
We've just launched the housing and accommodation piece. Now, it's not hugely, in tech terms, it's version 1.0. But what we've given is a place where if you're in trouble, if you need emergency accommodation anywhere in the country, there's a directory there.
Yeah.
Make the call. But we've got so much more to do. We want to launch our training and development. We're in chats with Sir Botham's son Liam to come and lead the sort of sports and leisure. We're putting a gaming piece in.
Yeah.
But when I say gaming, I'm not saying gambling. I'm talking about we're actually looking to design healthcare games that help people with trauma, that help individuals with memory problems, etc. So, and we're doing that in partnership with the NHS. So again, working together.
Yeah.
But we've got to look after those men and women when they come out of the forces properly. We've got to do a better job. And when we do start doing a better job, more will join. And that's what we're about. So, all your support, Mike, and the support of all your viewers.
I'm delighted to be able to do it.
We're still looking for Tanya. Tanya, who approached one of my colleagues and said she wants to invest because we're raising.
Right.
We've said to her, we've had 68
Well, she might be
veterans.
watching. So,
Tanya, if you're watching.
So tell the story of who Tanya was and what you know.
Yeah, Tanya came, approached
This
me.
was on the Shepherd's Bush Empire
Yeah,
night, right?
Tanya approached me after the show and said, look, myself and some friends are quite keen investing, and we have been raising recently. We've got about 300,000 that we need to raise now to complete, to launch all the other products and services. And it's hard. It's really hard at the moment, raising.
Yeah.
But we've had 68 veterans say, oh, I'll put in 5 grand or I'll put in 10 grand, etc. And Tanya came up and said, I want to invest some money. And I said, that's great. But I know I'll get in trouble if I start talking about these sort of things. So I better hand you over to our head of legal.
Yes.
Angus. And they had a good conversation. And Angus said, look, here's my card. Gave her his card with his email. And we haven't heard from Tanya.
Yeah.
So if you're out there, Tanya, come and do good and make good, as Blair said. And that's what it's about.
Okay.
You know? We are a business. Because we're not charity cases.
That's the point we wanted to make on the night, wasn't it?
Veterans aren't victims, we're assets, and we're building a business, and God knows we need more successful businesses in this country to get us out the pig's mess we're in at the moment.
We certainly are in a mess.
And I would just be absolutely, and you're an ambassador, Mike, you know, and
I'm very proud to be the first ambassador who's not from the military, actually.
Yep,
right?
no, it's wonderful, or your
a
contribution, and we've got to get you plugged into the platform, etc., on the whole sort of news and media piece. But
yes.
you know, just so if we could build a unicorn based on supporting our veterans and their families, and then we will look to. I mean, military families serving today get no medical support.
Right.
None.
Yeah.
So you're following your husband or wife around the world, kids, and they're moving every 2 years, and they don't have the funding. They're not given the money anymore.
There's so many problems with that sort of thing. I mean, we had Emma Webber in here yesterday, who was an incredible woman, you know, the mother of the boy who was murdered in Nottingham. And somebody said to me, and they sent me a note on it, that apparently if you are, these are government sort of scenarios, if one of your children is killed, or you get 2 weeks off for bereavement, you know, if you lose a child, that's all. That's it.
Yeah.
You know, and she was saying, when this happened 3 years ago, she was saying she and her husband haven't really been able to work. Of course they can't. You know, it's like a terrible, awful thing that happened. And similarly, you know, there's just not enough. And I'm all for, you know, people looking after themselves and people being self-sufficient as best they can. But some people occasionally need help, and the state is really bad at it.
Yeah, no,
it's really bad at it.
Absolutely. And I'm going to an event actually at the House of Commons week after next. An incredible lady by the name of Gilly Carell, whose husband sadly passed, having done 7 tours of Afghanistan. He had a brain tumour. And Gilly set up a charity called Beyond the Wire. And please go on their website and donate, because, wait for it, and I if you remember, I brought the CEO on your programme.
Yes.
Though the bereaved families were neither the responsibility of the Ministry of Defence or the Office of Veterans Affairs. They just fell through the cracks. No one looked after our bereaved families. And in Gilly's case, this is going to shock you, maybe, but her husband passed, and within 12 weeks, she'd lost her husband, her daughters had lost their father. They were then asked to leave their military quarter.
Wow.
So they then lost the community they knew and loved, who supported them.
Home.
And the daughters then had their boarding school allowance stopped, and they had to leave as well.
Yeah.
So within 12 weeks, Gilly and her daughters had lost everything.
Yeah.
Now, thankfully, that's changing, and we, you know, really banged the drum on that and said someone needs to take it, because that is just totally unacceptable.
No.
But these sort of things need to change. You know, and I suppose my last rant is, I still think it's disgraceful that our members of the armed forces have to pay for their own meals.
I know. Yeah. Because it's not like they're paid a fortune, is it, when they do the job that they do? But anyway, listen, great to see you, as
Thank
ever.
you.
We've got to ask you, actually, the poll we've got today. What do you put on your toast? Is it butter? Is it air, dry toast? Is it jam? Or is it sardines?
Butter and Frank Cooper's marmalade.
Frank Cooper's marmalade. People have been moaning, they're saying we shouldn't put Marmite on there.
Huh?
Marmite. Are you a Marmite fan?
Yeah.
Are you?
Yeah, with cheese.
Oh
yeah.
Aye, that's awful.
Love Marmite.
I can't have that. It's Marmite and cheese. I hate Marmite.
Frank Cooper's marmalade. Wherever you'd have had it in the mess and Vites.
Do you know I've got
wherever we travel around the world?
Yeah, I would have had it.
Frank Cooper's marmalade.
I would have had it. I used to have breakfast with Martin Bell.
Yeah, lovely bloke.
Which was
lovely,
great.
lovely fella.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Do you know whose marmalade I've got, Pooch?
Yeah.
Marilyn Hawes.
Oh,
she makes marmalade.
You gave me some.
Yeah, she brought in 2 jars of it, and so I've got half of it's gone already. It's very good.
Marilyn's
Homemade.
marmalade is definitely fruity.
Marilyn's it absolutely is. Yeah, that's probably alcoholic as well. There we go. Anyway, Hugh Andre, great to see you.
Mike.
We Served is the place to go. WeServed.com, is it?
That's right.
And you can find all sorts of great stuff there. And if you wish to help them out, by all means, please do so. I think it's time for me to do a little bit of a rant about Tony Blair, isn't it? Should we do a meltdown before we speak to Helen Dale? Yeah. What do you think? Yeah. So, Tony Blair, right? The guy that everybody loves to hate. The guy who was going to be one of the greatest prime ministers we ever had until he decided to go along with George Bush Sr. And invade, actually George Bush Jr. I should say, and invade Iraq, right? Some people accuse him of war crimes, some people accuse him of being in the pockets of the Americans, some people said that he should never have done it, that it was a massive mistake. And I think, apart from that, you might have said that Tony Blair was actually a pretty good prime minister. I used to get into terrible trouble with many of the people that used to listen to my show on Talk Sport, because I would say, until the moment he went into Iraq, actually, I thought Tony Blair was a pretty good prime minister. He came in 1997. He was suddenly the new broom in Downing Street. He replaced John Major, the grey man, the old guy who was, as it turns out, banging. What was her name? Who was it? He was seeing. Can't remember. Anyway. Well, no, there was no. I'm not talking about Blair. I'm talking about Major.
Oh, Edwina Curry.
Edwina Curry. That's right. Which is something you don't really want to think about. No. But the thing is, like, Tony Blair came in, he had young children, suddenly there was, joy, children singing, laughing in the sort of corridors of Downing Street, it was all great. So he's now come back, right? And it says here on the middle pages 6 and 7 of the Daily Mail, Burnham is now at war. That's Andy Burnham is now at war with Blair. But Blair has actually come out and said some quite interesting things. For example, has said that Ed Miliband's an idiot. He mocked him and said that net zero is a waste of time. He basically said that, we shouldn't be pursuing it because nobody in China gives a monkey's what Ed Miliband says. His quote was, do you really think that in China, the next person that you talk to is going to say, what does Ed Miliband think about that? No, of course they don't. So we alone are pursuing this net zero mania. You saw Jim Dale on earlier, incredibly, making an absolute fool of himself because he alone is the only person who thinks that net zero is a good idea. Even on the front of the Times today, we've got Keir Starmer coming under mounting pressure from his cabinet to rethink Labour's net zero agenda because nobody wants it. It's too expensive. We're going to pay more and more money over the course of the next 6 months to a year for our electricity. We're paying in excess of £2,000 a year for our electricity. 2,300, I think, is the average price that we pay. When in almost every other European country, it's 400 quid, 500 quid. It's ridiculous. So I'm pleased that Tony Blair has come out of the woodwork. I know that many of you watching this will think I've gone mad because you hate Tony Blair. But when you think of Tony Blair versus Keir Starmer, who would you rather have running the country right now? I'd much rather have Tony Blair in Downing Street because Keir Starmer is still a complete and utter dud. And the problem for us now is that because of the Makerfield by-election, nobody's talking about Keir Starmer anymore. Nobody's even looking at Downing Street. Nobody's going, what's he doing now? What's he up to? What sort of rubbish is he getting into with the European Union? What sort of promises is he making? Where's he going? Nobody's talking about that because they're all obsessed with what's happening in Makerfield and whether Andy Burnham's going to get elected, and whether Andy Burnham is going to be the next Prime Minister. Heaven forbid. I really, really hope that it's not that. But I welcome the return of Tony Blair because it reminds us of how proper political leadership actually should be. And you might think that's a very controversial opinion, but I don't, obviously. And I think the more Tony Blair sticks his oar in, the better for all of us. Don't you agree? Is Helen there?
Yep.
And now, I thought about saying, and now for something completely different. And now for something completely different. For some of you who are old enough to remember that, you'll know exactly what I mean. That was the old Monty Python thing, wasn't it? By the way, I should just read this out to you as well, because Charlotte, I was reminded when I was with Mark yesterday that Charlotte did this incredible piece of research about the Mike Graham show and the numbers on the Mike Graham show, and how the engagement levels by our audience are so much better than everybody else's, you know? That we basically have a slightly lower subscriber base, perhaps, than people like Piers Morgan and even Dan Wootton, who apparently had a go at me the other day. I'm going to have a look at that. We'll talk about it tomorrow. Sky News, BBC, Trigonometry, they're all bigger than we are, right? They've all got bigger audiences, if you like. But what they don't have is what we have, which is a very high level of integration with our fans and with our viewers. And people are far more engaged with this show than any other show on YouTube, right? This is the most engaged audience in UK news. It says the average Mike Graham subscriber watches the show every other day. The BBC's average subscriber watches less than 3 times a month. Sky News, 6. By the metric that actually matters, engagement, Mike is in a league of his own. So thank you once again. We've reached, we're on the way to 24 million views. We've got, I think, 164,000 subscribers now. So keep hitting that subscribe button, though. It doesn't cost you any money. It's absolutely utterly free. You don't have to sign up for anything. You don't have to promise to pay me anything. You just subscribe to the channel, right? And then you get alerted every time we do something. And as you know, we are about to expand into UK Live, which is going to be really exciting. Coming up a little bit later on today, we're going to be doing Plonk of the Week. Chris Walkie's here with Oliver. And so is Anna. Oh, hello. Anna McGovern's here as well. Excellent. So we're all here. I've got a friend visiting as well who's checking us out, Elena from Russia. Listen, I've got friends all over the world. Trust me. So let's talk to Helen Dale, who's also a friend of the show. She's from Australia. Helen, a very good morning to you.
Although I'm not in Australia now, I'm in the home counties, and that's why it's very bright and sunny and
lovely.
Things.
Yes. Well. Listen. I hope you're enjoying the heat wave, because being from Australia, you'll be well used to it, I'm sure.
It's very much. Certainly, Tuesday was a Australian summer's day.
Wasn't it nice? But I love that.
Yeah.
I do love that. I mean, the one thing I know that we haven't said we would talk about is Australia has become a bit of an odd country in your absence, hasn't it? It's become something that I never thought it would be, which is a slightly kind of authoritarian, slightly kind of, intolerant place, hasn't it?
There has always been a strong streak of authoritarianism in the Australian character, and a lot of people were unaware of this. And this goes back probably to the late 19th century. You can see elements of it in the Federal Compact, the Australian settlement, when the country was set up as the supposedly the working man's paradise was the expression that is used. And I remember having to say this during COVID when Victoria, you do have to remember it was only one state, it wasn't the whole country, it's a federal system, so the states vary. But when Victoria went mad and the police was firing rubber bullets at trade unionists who were protesting about COVID restrictions, I had to sort of get across to people that the bulk of the Australian population, obviously not all of them, but the bulk, the argument is you have to remember that Australians are maybe the descendants of convicts, but they're also the descendants of their jailers.
Yes.
And they were two large groups of people that came into the country and brought those values with them, often in conflict, often in tension. And the thing is, Australia is going through now, I can't say went, it is going through now, the realignment that Steve Davies talks about in this book, which I've just reviewed for Law and Liberty. Yeah. And one of the points he makes in this book, now that's a review copy, so if you buy this, you won't get that silly black stripe in the middle of the book. Just remember that. That's just my review copy because I reviewed it and it's only just come out. But Australia had not gone through the realignment because there's always a 12-month lead time on books. And Steve Davies says this in that book, The Historian, he's a political historian. And the thing is, the realignment in Australia has started to happen now. But 3 things had to happen to sort of blow Australians off their bum, because Australia has very stable, orderly politics. First, both Morrison and Albanese, there was all this pent-up demand for immigration because Australia has control of its borders. During COVID for a couple of years, it went massively net negative immigration. But there was all this pent-up demand because there's a lead time with immigrating to Australia because a lot of people want to go there. And Morrison and Albanese, so to both parties, passed that pent-up demand, allowed huge numbers of immigrants.
Just gone black again.
Into Australia. Am I?
Yeah.
I'm on air, it says.
Yeah, I can still hear you. That's okay. Carry on.
The second thing that happened was the Bondi massacre. And both the government, the Labor government, and particularly Albanese personally, and the coalition completely fluffed their handling of that, their response. They were appalling. Talk to Australians about Albanese's behaviour and they'll say he was appearing in public like, honestly, someone had stood behind him and put a key in his back and wound him up. And then the third thing that has just happened in the last fortnight is the ruling in Tickle and Giggle, which to use the... I know it's a ridiculous name, but that's the actual name of the case. I'm not making it up. Tickle and Giggle. The ruling in Tickle and Giggle has basically, to use the gender critical expression, peaked Australia. And so the realignment's happening in stages. In response to the first one, the immigration surge, the support for One Nation began to rise, and support for the coalition, which is supposed to be the centre-right opposition, which is basically the equivalent of the Conservatives, started to drop. One Nation overtook the Greens, which are traditionally the Australian protest vote party, where you park your vote if you're annoyed, but they are left-leaning, and they got badly blown up at the last election. Like Labor really took them on, and they lost their lower house seats, and they lost 2 senators and that kind of thing, which is bad. So One Nation became the place where people were parking their protest votes. Then the Bondi massacre happened, and this process accelerated. One Nation overtook the coalition in polling. And so it looked like, and reputable Australian pollsters were pointing out, like Cost Samaras, because the Australian electoral system is complex. Reputable Australian pollsters like Cost Samaras at Redbridge were pointing out, okay, we may be seeing a situation, and this has emerged on both sides of politics in Australian history, where one of the 2 major parties is supplanted by another one. And you get a situation where the unusually stable Australian voting system, instead of rewarding the coalition the way First Past the Post has historically rewarded Labor and the Conservatives, is starting to reward the insurgent party, One Nation. And then you started to get electoral results. One Nation now has 2 MPs in the lower house. One of them a defector from the coalition, from the National Party, Barnaby Joyce, a former Deputy Prime Minister of Australia. The other, a agribusiness consultant called Jim Farley, who's a very clever guy, who won his by-election and took it also from the coalition, but Labor didn't even bother to stand. They knew that they would be the wooden spoon, so they didn't even bother to stand. And he won that seat fair and square. One Nation also performed enormously well in the South Australian state election. Then, after those 2 results, the Tickle and Giggle result came down, and the coalition had been fence-sitting about it. So people like Sal Grover and her advisors, her solicitor, Catherine Dees, who I should disclose is a personal friend of mine, could not get a straight answer from the coalition and could not get a straight answer from Labor, because Labor don't want to dispute the legacy of Julia Gillard, the Prime Minister at the time, who brought the changes into
whatever happened to her? What is she doing? What is she doing now?
Going around on the junket, on the talk junket. And if you read Helen Joyce's latest piece in Joyce Activated, she talks about how people tried to query her about what she did to the Sex Discrimination Act in 2013 at a literary festival, and they were shut down and tossed out of the venue, which I think is very revealing. But anyway, then the ruling was handed down in Tickle and Giggle, which has peaked Australia, absolutely peaked Australia, become an enormous news story. Sal Grover has turned into Eddie everywhere. She's all over the Australian press talking about this. She presents very well. She's an entrepreneur, a founder, quite different from the stereotype of the feminist. Basically, you're dealing with a tech person and a marketing person rather than with the traditional image of the academic feminist. She's been all over the Australian press, and One Nation has been the most consistent supporter of women's sex-based rights and women's sex-based areas and spaces
you need
and
that.
events.
Yeah, you do need that.
And now, obviously, the coalition have now made their decision, and they've all gone for, we're backing sex-based rights as well. But One Nation were first. They were quickest in their response to the ruling. Pauline Hanson he's the leader of One Nation, she's a senator, had media ready to go. And so they have got the benefit of that issue. And what has happened in the two most recent polls, and I think a third one today, One Nation has now overtaken Labor in what's known as the primary vote. That is the number of people who will put number one next to the One Nation candidate's name on an Australian ballot.
So is that a similar thing to what's happening here with reform then, would you say?
Yes, it is, but it's much, much later. And if you read my Law and Liberty review, which I have put up on Twitter, if I can get you to retweet that.
I have retweeted it, yes. I retweeted it just before you came on. So there we are.
Excellent, thank you. It's got a link to the book. Learn which way. Yeah, it's a link to the book, and I explain how Davies genuinely didn't think that this was happening in Australia yet. Australia and New Zealand have been much, much later because what happens with the realignment, his key argument, and you can read my piece, which I summarise it and then decide that whether you want to buy the book or not. His key argument is the thing that used to divide people the most, back to about maybe 2000 and a bit later than that, it varies obviously from country to country, was economics.
Yes.
How much the government should intervene in the economy, or how little. And there was a real contest of ideas. We can all remember Margaret Thatcher. We can all remember the big fight with the unions. Well, those of us who are older than 40 anyway, can all remember this. It was a huge fight. It was a genuine fight between capital and labour.
Yeah.
Speaking not here as the political party or as capitalism per se, but as the factors of production in economics. There are three factors of production: land, capital, and labour.
Yes, and it feels a bit like we're going to end up there again, because I think in the sense that we're going to have to cut this short now because we're almost out of time. But we're almost going to fight that same fight, I think, again with the sort of the representation of the workers, which is different now because it's almost like just the public.
And
it's just the public sector,
Yeah, as Davey says, it's not over the economy. So obviously, although it still matters to a lot of people, it's over issues of culture, like immigration, like women's sex-based rights, over issues of identity. And this doesn't just come out for English people. It's not just reform. Anyone who thinks that Plaid Cymru and the Scottish National Party are somehow not parties of national identity is fooling themselves.
Oh yeah, and they're also massively social. They're also massively socialist parties as well. But listen, Helen, we've got to run.
Same thing.
I know. We've got to run. So the book review is Law and Liberty is where it can be found, where she's written the piece. Look on my Twitter account, and I've retweeted her tweet, which you can see. Helen Dale, thank you very much indeed. We've got to run just because we're out of time. The clock is against us. And there's something a bit odd going on. I don't know what's going on, but I can't see anything.
No. I can see you fine. If that's
I know you can, and everybody can see you as well, but I can't see you for some reason. Anyway, never mind. I'll just carry on piloting the show in the dark.
Yeah, good.
You might as well pull the lights off.
Okay.
And we'll go to Pooch's Pooch, shall we?
Yeah,
let's do Pooch's Pooch, which I also won't be able to see. But don't worry, I've already looked at it this morning. So it's the Beagles again. It's the cooking with beagles, right? Which is brilliant. What are they cooking today?
Pumpkin pie.
Pumpkin pie, there you go. Thanksgiving special.
Welcome to Cooking with Beagles. Today we'll be cooking. First we're gonna cut the pumpkin. You don't like it? You don't like it? Oh! Okay, come on, wait. Now we make the dough.
She's learned.
I think that's enough for you now. It's finally done.
Oh, brilliant. Fantastic.
That's it.
Oh, you Kiki wants it.
We've got to get the Cooking with Beagles guy on. He's Italian, I think. There we go. Brilliant. Fantastic show again today. Thank you to all of you for watching. We had, of course, the incredible collection of guests. We had William Yarwood, who was great this morning, talking about the problem with unemployment and Britain's youth. Henry Bolton was here. Dr. Enat Wilf from Israel was along. Jamie Jenkins giving us the lowdown on the statistics and what we're looking at. Lauren the Insider, also brilliant. Paul Burgess and Jim Dale, by the way. That was great. We've got to get that out there on a clip if we can. Hugh Andre was just here as well from We Served. Helen Dale there as the final guest. And all of the great comments that you've put in, thank you very much indeed to all of you. Coming up tomorrow at 7 a.m. and we will be back for the end of the week. And it's been a very lovely weather-wise week, hasn't it? It's been beautifully hot. And now, of course, it's just very beautifully cool and chilled out. But apparently it's going to get hot again tomorrow, they say. Yeah, I think so. Back to 31, 32, something like that. But I'll be in the countryside by then, so I don't think I'll care.
And how does Ziggy fare in the heat?
He doesn't like the heat. No, he's like, but we gave him a wash on Sunday. Sort of shampooed him, and so he was wet like for the whole day. So he was really happy, you know. And his fur was all, you know, clean, and he smelled beautiful. Because he's such a lovely dog. But I have to take him out really early in the morning because he can't go out after sort of 8 o'clock. It's too hot. So you know. There we are. Anyway, thanks to all of you for watching. We're going to film Plonk of the Week in a minute with Anna McGovern, who's here, and with Chris Walkie and Oliver, of course. I don't know what the theme is. What's the theme today, guys, this week?
Light and refreshing.
Light and refreshing. Excellent. Sounds good to me. So I'll be lying down horizontally probably in about 2 hours, and I'll be taking it easy at home. Thanks to all of you. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Do subscribe to our channel because it just helps the algorithms. You don't have to pay any money at all. And if you want to pay some money, you can join the Substack or you can become a member of our YouTube community, because coming up soon, we're going to be giving you the opportunity to watch our live show, which we filmed at the Shepherd Bush Empire a couple of weeks ago. That's going to be available soon. But if you want to get a discount or maybe even get it for free, you can sign up to Substack and the YouTube channel. And we'll ask Donald.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
He doesn't like giving money away.
Doesn't he?
No.
That's why he lives in a big house.
Yeah, no.
You know, he's a millionaire. We've had problems with that in the past. We'll have words. Anyway, good to see you all. I'll see you tomorrow morning at 7.
Why don't you relax and be a bit more MG? That would be a triumph.